A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available. Thank you. So, hello, a very warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IES. Welcome to the session of geography, where we shall be proceeding with the concept and the area of Indian geography. Now, yesterday we had taken a look at the details of the other physiographic divisions of the country. We had understood and addressed few of the common areas from where mains questions are generally asked in the portion of physiography. We have taken a look at the features of the islands that we have. We have taken a look at the features of the coastal plains, of the Ghats, and also the peninsular plateau system. And also, we moved on into the drainage system, where we understood the concept that when we have the drainage, now that drainage can also be divided into different types, classified into different types based upon that whether they appear to be following the slope of the land, where they will be referred to as sequent streams, and in certain cases where they appear to defy the slope of the land, that is the case of insequent streams. Now we move ahead to the portion of drainage patterns. Now, lagoon is any kind of an accumulation of saline water that you have. Mostly it is a sea water which gets accumulated in an area, that is a lagoon. Estuary is always to be found at the mouth of the river, where you have seawater coming in and mixing with the fresh water. So estuary is a region where you will have fresh water and saline water mixing with each other, but in lagoon that is not always the case. Okay, so here when we talk about the drainage pattern, what is drainage pattern? So, whenever you have any kind of drainage, any kind of river movement, any kind of stream movement, now in that case, it tends to follow a particular kind of a pattern, a geometrical pattern. And that geometrical pattern is referred to as the drainage pattern. Now, wherever a river flows, we have seen in the case of geomorphology that the river has got an erosional power with associated with it. It does have a significant amount of force associated with it. But there also, depending upon the slope of the land, depending upon the topography, depending upon the nature of the rocks, how old the rocks are, where you have the hard rock or the soft rock structure, accordingly, you have the classification of the drainage patterns. This portion of drainage pattern is going to be relevant for your prelims only. Okay? Because if a question from this comes to the mains examination, that will be a very easy one for you guys. So, here, if you think about it, as you can see, depending upon the various shapes that the or the various geometrical patterns that the river exhibits, that is the base and the sole criteria for the classification of these drainage patterns. Now, one of them that you will see, which is very common in majority of the river systems, is the case of the dendritic pattern. Now, what is a dendritic pattern? Dendritic pattern basically is observed where, let's suppose, a river is moving, and wherever it finds a slope, it basically ends up having a movement along with that. Let's suppose even when we talk about the tributaries of the river, they simply, wherever they have that slope, they will tend to follow that. So it appears to look like the dendron, right? You have the ends of the nerve cells. So it appears to look like that. Or you can think about like the roots of the tree. So that is where the feature of the dendritic pattern lies in. Now, where will you find this kind of a pattern? Wherever the rock systems in this area, let's suppose the rock systems in this particular entire region, or the ground surface, be it the sedimentary deposits, wherever you have uniform kind of ground system or uniform kind of rock systems available, that means erosion can be carried out equally in all the areas. So that is where the river can actually follow whichever path that allows it to move into a particular kind of a slope. So generally observed in areas of uniform rock beds, rocky surfaces, where the rate of erosion is consistent all around. Okay, wherever the rate of erosion is consistent all around, that is what is referred to as the case of dendritic pattern. So, for example, River Ganga for a large portion will represent dendritic pattern, River Yamuna will represent dendritic pattern. When you talk about Indus, Godavari, Mahanadi, Kaveri, Krishna, all of them at one point or the other will represent a kind of a dendritic pattern. Wherever they come across or they encounter a uniform rock formation, they will exhibit a kind of a dendritic pattern in existence. So here what you see is in the youthful stage of river Brahmaputra, the image that you see. Now here you will observe that the flow is almost from anywhere and everywhere in a kind of a randomized shape. You will find a kind of a flow, which tells you that there is a kind of a uniform rock bed which is being eroded depending upon where the slope leads the river into. Okay, so that is where dendritic patterns. So mostly you will find that the rivers, whenever they flow through the plain areas having sedimentary deposits, there the rivers have the ability to form any kind of pathway, any kind of a pattern, which actually adheres to the kind of a motion, and that is what is known as the dendritic pattern. Then you have the trellis drainage pattern. Now, trellis drainage pattern is a bit unique. Here, you'll find that if a river comes into place, let's suppose a river comes, and if I can show you this particular image here, this is the trellis pattern. So here you will observe that as the river moves, let's suppose this is the movement of the river, you will observe that the primary tributaries are the ones which join the main river, and then you have the secondary tributaries which join the primary tributaries. So in this case, you will observe that the primary tributaries are joining the main river at right angles. Okay, the primary tributaries are joining at right angles, and then you have the secondary tributaries which end up joining the primary tributaries again at right angles. So that is basically the case of trellis. Now here I want you to observe the feature of the rocks. You'll find that the areas where the river is draining through, the tributaries etc are draining through, that is basically a bit depressed, and the other areas are a bit upraised, which have not been eroded. Okay, so here you will find that areas of rocks are very hard and resistant where erosion does not happen, but simultaneously you have the areas of soft rock also where this process of erosion takes place. So generally the pattern here that you will see is that most of the primary tributaries, they are parallel to each other, right? So if let's suppose this is the river, the primary tributaries in this case are parallel to each other, most of them. And the secondary tributaries, when they join the primary tributaries, they will be joining them at right angles. So here you will find that they are parallel to each other, and the secondary tributaries are joining at right angles. Now, where will you find this? Wherever you have the alternate structure of hard and soft rocks, it is in those areas that you will find the trellis drainage pattern. So, wherever you have alternate arrangement of hard and soft rocks. Okay, where the soft rocks have been eroded and the hard rocks are resistant enough. So, softer rocks are eroded and harder rocks remain resistant. Okay, so that is the case of a trellis drainage pattern. Now, where will you find them? So, if you think about it, so in areas where, let's suppose, there has been alternate layering of hard and soft rock thereby. Now, if that area undergoes a kind of a folding event, let's suppose if we talk about any particular region, let's suppose if we talk about any particular region where you have that alternate arrangement of hard and soft rock structure. So let's suppose here you have the presence of hard, then soft, then hard, and then again soft. Let's suppose this is your hard rock structure, this is your soft rock structure. Softer rock means sedimentary layers. In general, you will have layers of sedimentary rocks oftentimes trapped in between. And then again, maybe a layer of hard rocks, and then again, a layer of another soft rock. Now, in such terrains, obviously the land would have evolved quite significantly. That after sedimentation, maybe you would have had a layer of igneous rock formation. Again, sedimentation would have happened. Again, a layer of hard rock structure. So in that case, if let's suppose there is a folding, okay, let's assume there is folding. Now, in that case, what will happen? What will be the consequence of this? So in that case, if there is a folding event, so the folding event would be somewhat like this, where hard and soft rocks, if both of them, they get folded. Okay. As they get folded. Now here, as this process of folding happens, what is the consequence of that? Now the hard rocks will be here, right? Then followed by soft rocks. Then followed by another layer of hard rocks. And followed by another layer of soft rock structure. Now, if a landform is created like this, over a period of time, exogenic forces, which are also called the levelers, the exogenic forces mostly will flatten it out, right? Weathering, erosion, etc. will tend to flatten it out. So as they flatten out the surface, observe the feature on the ground. As this gets flattened out, observe the feature on the ground. Now on the ground, here you will find hard rock, then followed by soft rock, then again followed by hard rock, then again followed by softer rock, then again followed by a harder rock, then again followed by softer rock. So in this kind of a structure, you will observe that wherever the soft rock and the softer rock structure is present, that will be eroded by the river, the tributaries, but then the main hard rock will be left uneroded. So that is where you will find that this can lead to a kind of a trellis drainage. So if a river tributary tends to flow, it will tend to erode from here, then again here, then again here. So that is what makes the alternate erosion of the soft rock structure. That is what creates a parallel system of these tributaries. You told that hard rocks cannot be folded, there can be a fault. Yes, there can also be occurrence of fault. In many of the cases, there is occurrence of faults. But if you talk about, let's suppose, if you only have the layer of hard rocks only, there the folding won't always be possible. But if you have the hard rocks which are not in a very thick layer, but hard and soft, so that means there is not that great a structural integrity, that is not that great a stiffness which is present. Let's suppose, Seema, in this case, if it would have been a kind of a thick layer of only hard rocks, then it would have been very difficult to get them folded. Having said that, sometimes even the hard rock structures get folded, right? Sometimes where you have only the presence of hard rocks, under certain conditions they can also get folded, but that is the case where you have the river movement to happen. Okay, so here basically that is how you get the parallel arrangement of the hard and soft rock structure. So obviously the rivers will be draining through. So observe these tributaries, they are almost parallel to each other, primary tributaries. Why? Because they are able to erode the softer rock structure. So here, trellis drainage pattern develops where sedimentary rocks have been folded or tilted and then eroded to varying degrees depending upon their strength. Primary tributaries of rivers, they flow parallel to each other, and secondary tributaries join them at a kind of a right angle. Now, obviously, this won't be observed in sedimentary basins and newer landforms. This will be observed in the very older landforms, significantly older landforms. So that is where you will observe this trellis drainage pattern. So, example, old fold mountains of the Singhbhum region or the Chota Nagpur plateau. That is where many of the smaller rivers will indicate a kind of a trellis drainage pattern. Not larger rivers per se, but the smaller rivers draining through these plateau areas, they will end up indicating a kind of or exhibiting a kind of a trellis drainage pattern. Then you have a radial drainage system. How softer rocks are also arranged, which allows the river streams to erode. It is not a rare condition. So let's suppose, Shyam, your question is that how softer rocks are also arranged, which allows the river system to erode 90 degrees to each other. Is it not a rare? It is a rare condition. Trellis drainage pattern you don't find everywhere. It is a very rare condition observed only in the case of old plateaus, where over the plateau, over a period of millions of years, there has been a sedimentary deposit. On top of that, let's suppose another volcanic eruption has created a thin layer of volcanic rocks, another sedimentary deposit. So that is not always to be found, but only in the case of the old plateau structures you will find them. Okay, and let's suppose over the hard rock area, if you think about it, if you have over a hard rock area a river, a small stream which originates, now immediately the tendency of the stream will be to flow down the slope and will join the river system draining through here. So that is why the secondary rivers and the secondary streams and the secondary tributaries, rather, these secondary tributaries will always end up joining at right angle because they are coming from a particular height and coming down the slope. Now, then we talk about the radial drainage. What is radial drainage? So, let's suppose from a particular hill or a mountain area, let's suppose from a particular hill or a mountain area, now, there that mountain area can be very large or a hill area can be very large. Now, let's suppose here you have multiple streams which are originating from here. You can always have one stream which flows like this, drains in this direction. Another stream flows like this and drains in a different direction altogether. Then you can have another stream which drains here, originates here, and moves in different direction, depending upon the slope of the land. Right. So generally in the older hills and older volcanic areas where no active volcanism is found now, but in such older areas where you have origin of multiple streams from the same hill or the upland region, there you will observe the radial drainage pattern. For example, in central India, around the region of the Amarkantak Hills, there you will have simultaneously the origin of river Narmada also, river Son also. While river Narmada, which also originates from the region of Amarkantak, it drains to the west and joins the Arabian Sea. When we talk about, let's suppose, the region of, or when we talk about River Son originates and joins the, or moves in the northward direction. So that is also what is radial drainage pattern. So in this case, River Narmada and Son, they originate very close to each other. River Son drains in the northward direction, joins River Ganga. River Narmada drains to the west and drains into Arabian Sea. So here, the streams radiate outwards from a central high point. Volcanoes usually display excellent radial drainage. The older volcanoes, obviously, please don't have the doubt that if the volcanic eruption is happening, how can the river will be moving? River will also get heated up. Older volcanoes, where at one point of time, these were the volcanoes. Now, they usually display excellent radial drainage and also commonly developed across domes and laccoliths. Now, here a good example of the radial drainage pattern is provided by the rivers originating from the Amarkantak mountain. So that is the case of radial drainage system. Now, the opposite of it is what is the centripetal drainage. Opposite in the sense that in the case of radial, what do you observe? That from the central high point, the streams originate and they move in different directions, isn't it? The opposite of it will be, let's suppose you have mountains on all sides. Mountains on all sides, and in the central portion, there's a kind of a depression. So the smaller streams which will originate from these mountains, smaller seasonal streams which will originate from the mountains, they will accumulate their water in the central depression. That is what is centripetal drainage. Centripetal, the centripetal force you would have basically come across centripetal force. What is centripetal force? Acting towards the center, right? So here, let's suppose you have mountains on all sides. And let's suppose here you have mountains on all sides, hills and mountains on all sides. And let's suppose in the central portion, you have a kind of a depression. Now, in that case, here, let's suppose here you have that kind of an existence. So in this situation, as the rivers would basically end up originating, they would end up draining into that central position, right? Central depression and the central position. Now, this is only to be found in smaller and seasonal streams, not in the case of large rivers to the scale of river Ganga or river Brahmaputra, because these large rivers will carry so much amount of water that the central depression will become very small to accumulate all that water. So generally found in the mountains areas and the hilly areas where you have many small streams and seasonal streams which are in existence. So in the region of Nepal Himalayas, you will find them. In the region of, in few areas of even Uttarakhand Himalayas, you will find them. For example, you will also be able to find them in the region, let's suppose, if you talk about Loktak Lake in Manipur, right? Loktak Lake in Manipur is significantly famous and well known for the drainage of water, where you have accumulation of water in the central portion. And that is a unique biodiversity where you have floating vegetation. There also you have these seasonal streams which drain into the Loktak Lake. So that is where the central depression which is there, that creates a large pool of water in general. So it is similar to the radial drainage system, with the exception that in the case of radial drainage, the river streams, they move out, they move in different directions. Whereas when we talk about the centripetal drainage is where it will accumulate. Okay. No, Amarkantak is the example of radial drainage. Because from Amarkantak, you will have rivers originating in different directions. Centripetal drainage, please understand, centripetal drainage is where the water will be accumulating from all different sides. Yes, Musharraf, it will create a large lake of sorts. Very large lake will be created. In trellis drainage, primary tributary are parallel only, or parallel and perpendicular? Only parallel, Rohit, only parallel to each other. Okay. So streams of Ladakh, Tibet, Bagmati, and the tributaries in Nepal, they will represent a kind of a centripetal drainage. Then you have the pinnate drainage. Now, pinnate is a kind of a drainage pattern where you will observe, let's suppose, as is the case in the case of river Narmada, let's suppose you have hill ranges like this. Okay. Let's suppose you have the hill ranges or the ridges, and they are parallel to each other. In the Rift Valley structures, in the parallel mountain ranges, etc. Now, if a river is draining from the central portion, let's suppose a river is draining from the central portion, its tributaries, which are coming from these hills or the mountains, they will be joining it at small angles, and they will not be very, very long. Right? So, what it represents is a kind of a leaf like structure. When we talk about a leaf, so in the veins of the leaf, the structure that you find is somewhat similar. So here, in the case of a pinnate drainage, that is what you find is where the tributaries will be joining them at very small angles, right? So here, for example, river Narmada, as it drains in the Rift Valley between the Vindhyas and the Satpuras, the tributaries of river Narmada, that will be joining it at very small angles. If let's suppose this is the main river, if let's suppose this is the main river, they will be joining them at very short angles. Very small angles is how the tributaries will be joining them. Okay, so that is what you find in this particular scenario, in this particular case of pinnate drainage. So these are few of the drainage patterns that you can go through. Just observe in which kind of structure they can be found and where they can be found. That will be more than sufficient for your examination. Okay. Now, after this, we have to by heart which river making which pattern. Again, I will ask you the same question. If I tell you you have to learn the all the rivers and which pattern does it make? Now, first of all, you tell me, can a river make multiple drainage patterns in its course of a flow, or will the river be able to generate only one kind of a pattern? What do you think? Can a river generate multiple drainage patterns in its flow, or will it be able to generate only one kind of a drainage pattern? Vishwas. Okay. Multiple. From its origin to its destination, the river can basically end up adopting multiple drainage patterns. So even if I tell you that learn all of them, will you be able to learn? Because Narmada in the initial stages will show radial, then in the middle stages it will show pinnate, in the end stages it might show dendritic. River Ganga will show dendritic in certain parts. In the hilly areas, the rivers might show the pinnate drainage pattern. So please only try to learn what is possible. Okay. And if anybody suggests to you that learn everything and or everything which is there, clearly they are not guiding you well. So please don't have that kind of a question that do we need to learn all of this. Never, from me at least, you will never get an answer that yes, learn all of this. I always will follow the principle that the more you understand it, the better it is. That is where you will have a reduced tendency to forget. If you learn everything, then you will have a tendency to forget, and inevitably you will do or commit a mistake here or there. So that is the case of the drainage pattern. The kind of questions which can be framed in the prelims here can be of match the following, where on one side you will have, let's suppose, what can be listed is radial, on one side, then dendritic, right? Then maybe trellis, and then you can have the match the following kind of a thing, or which of them are correctly matched. For example, streams flow outwards, right? Flow outwards. Then, for example, the streams are parallel to each other or not. So such kind of a match the following kind of a question can always be asked in the case of uh, the prelims examination. Now we come to the river systems of India and the Indian forests. Sahil, my dear friend, means PYQ of climatology and oceanography. We will discuss few of the means PYQ. Have you understood the concept of climatology and oceanography, and were you able to address the prelims questions based on oceanography and climatology? Let me know. Were you able to address those questions, or did you find any difficulty in that? No? Okay. We will discuss. Please understand, at the end of the 24 modules, if you still have that grievance that this is not covered, that has not been discussed, then we will discuss it. We will cover it. As of now, let's concentrate for a brief moment. Sahil, yesterday also and day before yesterday also, you were flooding the questions and the comments with the same thing. PYQ of climatology and oceanography means PYQ. We will discuss. I will not leave you high and dry. And basically, there also, when we discuss the mains PYQ, I will basically be telling you that, and I have told you that from this area, mains questions can be asked, in this area, prelims question can be asked. I have told you about the formation of cyclones, they have been asked. I have told you about the ocean currents, that they can be asked. These kinds of questions can be framed. Have I told that in the class or not? Yes, if I have told that in the class, then what is the issue in that? We will cover it. Please don't feel that don't get that kind of a tendency that, okay, he has not discussed this. What is this? Whatever he has taught is of no use because mains PYQ of climatology and oceanography have not been discussed. Hold your horses, Sahil. We will discuss it tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow, by the way, we have an extra session. Now, Geeta, multiple drainage pattern. Yes, that is correct. If river streams are diverged only two different directions opposite to each other from top of a mountain, then can we call them as a radial pattern? Why not? Yes, obviously, even if two is there, that is more than sufficient. Swaroop, a rectangular drainage pattern is basically that kind of a drainage pattern where all the tributaries, they will join at right angles, all the tributaries. So that is generally observed where you have the cracks and the fault lines in the rock system, where the tributaries will end up joining in a perpendicular direction. So if, let's suppose, this is the river, then the tributaries will end up joining it at right angles. Okay, here also they will join them at right angles. So wherever you have such fault lines amongst the rocks, cracks amongst the rocks in such a way, that is where rectangular drainage pattern will be observed. Okay, right? The time for tomorrow will be notified to you, and that you will get an idea. You will be given the notification of the time. Mostly around 6:30 or 6, we will have that session, right? In the case of trellis drainage pattern, Aditya, not always will the primary tributaries be at right angle. But in the case of rectangular, they will always be at right angle. Okay. Naveen, what is your question? How do we attend the prelims test series in online? You will get questions on your screen. You will be asked to click on the options. You will be asked to go to the next question. Then another question will appear on the screen. You will be asked to click on the option. Then you will be asked to go on the next question. At the end of it, you will be asked to end the test. You will get the marks of it. That is how you attempt it online. Was that the doubt, or is there any other kind of a doubt? And is the leaf-like pattern most common pattern? No, dendritic pattern is the most common pattern. And Ganga river is not antecedent. Is it due to that it does not originate beyond the Himalayas? Yes, it originates very significantly within the region of the Himalayas. Tributaries and distributaries. When you talk about tributaries and distributaries, so for example, if you talk about a tributary, let's suppose you talk about a tributary. So tributaries are the ones which will accumulate water into the central river, which will provide water to the central river. Naveen, was that your question? Again, I will ask, was that your question or was there any other question? How to attend prelims test series online? So these are your tributaries, where basically you'll find the waters coming into the central portion. And as the water flows, eventually in the lower course, that is where the water will start getting distributed. That is where water will distribute away from the mainstream. These are your distributaries. So the when the water is given to the main river, that is a tributary, and then this is a distributary. For enrolled students, you don't have to pay for the prelims test series. And where on Byju's? What where on Byju's? Okay, where on Byju's will you get the test? You will have the link for that, my dear friend. Test series is starting from 24th of December, if I'm not mistaken. Right? And right now we are on 8th of December. So we are still a long way away from where do I attempt the questions. That kind of a query should generally arise on 21st, 22nd, 23rd. So there is still a long way, around more than 14 days, more than 2 weeks are left. Wait for it. Again, I would say, please don't get panicked that okay, I will be left without attempting the prelims test series, and I had prepared so much but I did not know where the option was and I could not. That does that happen in your life? Generally it doesn't happen, does it? Have you come across a scenario in your life where you were there to attempt an examination and you did not know where to attempt, and that simply went away? You will get that. If let's suppose you are in the portal itself, you will get that option of a test series. If you click on that, then you will get the option which test series, where, etc., how to attempt that. You will get all the details there itself. Having said that, if let's suppose you don't get that, if let's suppose you don't want to explore that, shoot a mail to is live. That is an option always available to you. Okay. Yes, Yogi, that is correct. And Aditya, today is my day. What does that signify? And is it possible that the Brahmaputra and Indus River originate from the same region and have a radial flow? No, they originate from a slightly different area. It is not in the exact same region, around the region of Mansarovar Lake, but the river Indus originates from the Bukharchu Glacier. River Brahmaputra originates from the Chemyangdong Glacier. So there is a bit of a distance in between. Okay, today is your birthday, so happy birthday for that, Aditya. And I hope and I wish this year brings you a kind of good luck and you are able to study. Shan, till now I have attended modern history, polity, and geography. Should I make an attempt? Absolutely, yes. Why not? Okay. Now, distributory always occurs at lower course. Yes. So, Aditya, you have wishes from everyone coming around. So, again, a happy birthday. Now coming to the river systems of India and the forests. Now this is the one which is relevant for your prelims as well as in the mains examination. Generally, for the past couple of years, UPSC is not asking a question from this in the prelims, where in prelims you will get questions associated with the tributaries of the major rivers and their tributaries. Okay, that is the area from where you can get these questions. Major cities, lying on the banks of the river. Okay, that is where you get questions in this case. And then forest, I will tell you differently. And in the mains examination, you get questions associated with flooding of Himalayan rivers or flooding of rivers. Why does it happen? Then also the aspect of interlinking of rivers. So in both these cases, you basically get mains questions which are oftentimes repeated from this area. That why is it that the Himalayan rivers they get flooded year after year? Why is it that interlinking of rivers is a must, is required, etc.? This kind of a question will be asked. River disputes are in the purview of polity, Rajneesh. So, which is the article of Constitution which covers river disputes? All the champions of polity. Which is the article which covers about river disputes and the river tribunals? Good. 154. Is it a random guess that you have taken that it should be between 100 and 200? Let me write 154. So the rest of you, have you paid attention only on who is the prime minister and who is the chief minister, who becomes home minister, what is majority in a parliament? Only that you have covered. I see only 10 people have given the correct answer in this case. Good. It is basically Article 262, Part 1 of it. Now, if you are replying, means you have searched from the Google, from internet. So now I don't give credit to the answers now. But okay, it is Article 262. So it is in that portion where you will cover the area of river tribunals and the river disputes and the committees which have been formed in that case. So all of that you will be covering in the portion of polity if you have not already covered. Okay. Now here, after this, when we talk about the river systems of India, now the rivers, rightly so, they are known as the cradle of the civilizations. Cradle of the civilizations mean they have been the supporter, and these river systems and the river valleys have been the areas where civilization actually has come into existence. Any of the older civilization that you talk about, you'll find that it always generally comes across in the case of wherever you have the river systems draining, etc. It always comes into place in the areas where the civilizations come into existence, where you have the major rivers which are draining. For example, the Harappan civilization germinated on the banks of river Indus and its tributaries, the Indus river system. When, let's suppose, you talk about the Mesopotamian civilization came across the banks of which river? Today I will test your general knowledge for other areas also. Good, Yogi. Okay, all those who are saying Nile, Egyptian civilization rose on the banks of which river then? If Mesopotamian came into existence on the banks of river Nile, Egyptian civilization came on the banks of which river? Good. So basically, Mesopotamian came into existence on the banks of river Euphrates and Tigris in the present day area of Iraq and West Asia. That is where you had the rise of the Mesopotamian civilization. And when you talk about the Egyptian civilization, that came across the banks of river Nile. So as you can see, majority of the civilizations, or almost all the civilizations that have come across, that have come into existence, they have generally come into existence across the banks of major rivers. Why? Because the rivers provide you with a significant amount of benefit. They not only create a fertile sedimentary deposit around them where you can grow crops, and you can pursue agriculture as an economic activity. You can sustain yourself with the food that you can grow. Other than that, the rivers provide you with the much important or the much required fresh water for domestic purposes, for animals, animal rearing, for drinking water supply, and also for transportation. Now, in the older days, rivers would be the main source or one of the main arteries for transportation. Not only in the older days, right up till very recent times, right? They would be the main arteries of for transportation. For example, during the major battles, always rivers would serve as a conduit by which the forces could travel very large distances. For example, if you talk about the region, let's suppose here, when we talk about the area of during the age of Mahajanapadas, you have studied the age of Mahajanapadas. One of the most powerful kingdom of that time was the Magadhan Empire, and the Magadhan Empire had eventually shifted its capital from Rajgiri to Patliputra or Patna. And Patna was also known by the name Jaladurg, right? Or the water fortress. So, why is that the case? Because Patliputra, where it is situated, it is surrounded by rivers from almost all sides. So it became impenetrable for the forces to attack Patliputra and to capture it. It became almost impenetrable, impossible. And to add on to that, the armed forces of Magad and from Patliputra, they had the ability to move in any of the directions based upon the river movement. They could move in any directions, and that provided them with increased amount of agility. And that was one of the root causes of the power center, where Patliputra remained the power center for a long period of time. Right? It was shifted to Kannauj during the time of the Harsha and the Harsha Empire. Before that, Patliputra used to be the center of power at that point of time. Even during the time of the Mughals, for example, when the Mughal army, and this is particularly well articulated during the reign of Humayun, it is documented as well. So when Humayun engaged in battle with Sher Shah Suri, at that point of time, Sher Shah basically mounted a surprise attack after Humayun, basically, in the case of monsoonal rains, as the entire armed forces and the royal family was resting in the plains across the river. That is when Sher Shah, during the midst of the night, mounted a surprise attack. Now, that while that caused heavy losses to the Mughal army, the only way in which few of the Mughal armed forces and also the royal family could escape the onslaught was because they took to the river. And with the help of the river, they could escape. So that is where rivers have always served a lot of purpose. Even today, when we talk about major economies, for example, China, for example, US, for example, even in the case of Europe, the major economies that you see, they still end up transporting large amount of goods through their rivers, what is referred to as the internal waterways. They end up transferring large amount of goods through the rivers, and what it does, it basically makes the transportation much cheaper. We have also embarked on that same mission, and we have started declaring national waterways, where basically the aim is that few years down the line, maybe a decade down the line, these rivers can connect the interior areas and provide them with a conduit to move closer to the sea. So that has always been one of the most important factors when it comes to rivers. That is why rivers have always been the cradle of the civilization or the birthing ground of the various civilizations. Now, the might of Chola kingdom was significantly dependent on the river Kaveri. So you will find endless examples like this. Now, when we talk about Indian rivers here, in the case of the rivers across India, they serve a large amount of population and they are of significant use. That is why we always end up venerating the rivers. We treat the rivers with a kind of a reverence. We worship our rivers, right? So we tend to significantly worship the rivers, and that is why even in temple architecture you would have studied that, be it the Nagara style, be it the Dravida style, in all of these you will find that rivers, and they are depicted either as dwarpals or in the various different structural motifs the rivers are depicted. So that is where the cultural reverence for the rivers has always been in existence. It is only because of significant population pressure and high amount of impoverishment that is where the pollution of rivers in our country started happening at an accelerated pace. Other than that, the rivers in India had always been worshipped, right? You had kings and the kingdoms carrying the water of river Ganga to far off places into the south and basically using that water as a kind of an auspicious thing, maybe to inaugurate a building or maybe to start construction or maybe even to begin their rule. They would always have that river water, which had a significant importance. Even today, if you observe the origin source of majority of the rivers, most of them are pilgrimage centers. River Godavari originates in the region of Trambakeshwar in Nashik. It is a pilgrimage center. When you talk about River Ganga, all the tributaries originate from the various places such as Badrinath, such as Kedarnath, and all these areas. Gangotri, Yamunotri, all these are the Char Dhams, which are again places of worship. Mansarovar Lake, from where around the region of which you have River Indus, Satluj, Brahmaputra, all of them originating. That is also a place of veneration, that is also a place of worship. Then, for example, River Kaveri originates in the region of Brahmagiri Hills in the area of Thal Kaveri, again a place of worship. So mostly you will find that even today we have maintained that wherever that river originates, even Amarkantak, yes, wherever the river originates, that is always cited to be one of the portions of or one of the pilgrimage centers. Okay, so we will study here the major Indian rivers and their tributaries also we will get an idea of. Now here again, before you have the main question that do we need to learn all of this, let me tell you, only the major rivers and their tributaries get through it. UPSC generally is not going to ask you about River Ganga. Why? Because it is so very well known and it becomes easy for the larger masses. But UPSC has asked previously consecutive times about a question about River Brahmaputra. That has been asked about the tributaries, which of them are tributaries of Brahmaputra, which of them are tributaries of Indus. That has been asked. But having said that, here also you have a limitation. Because please understand, even the books that you see, any book that you will come across, you might find few of the tributaries, maybe 10, 12 tributaries for a river. But a river can have many, many tributaries, small ones, small streams, etc. Right? And there you will have a limitation again that you will reach. So only those one, let's suppose a smaller stream is in news, maybe because of excessive pollution, maybe because of excessive flooding in a region, always advisable to go back and think about it, that where that is, it joins which particular river. That should always be the approach. Now here, how do you classify the Indian rivers? For their classification and for the broader understanding, how do you classify the rivers? So there are two ways in which you can classify the rivers. One of them is based upon drainage. Where do they drain? They can drain into Bay of Bengal or they will drain into Arabian Sea, isn't it? Now here, if you think about this particular kind of a classification, here you will have the Aravali divide, water divide at Aravalis, right? And now this Aravali system and the hill system, basically, and the Delhi Ridge system, that is responsible for diverting the Indus River system in a different direction and the Ganga River system in a different direction. Then, for example, the Western Ghats, that acts as a water divide between the eastward and the westward flowing rivers, that is the Sahyadris. So this can serve as a water divide in that case. But the problem with this classification is, if you go for this classification, that means you are basically putting all the Arabian Sea drainage in one category, all the Bay of Bengal drainage in one category. Now that is a problem. Why? Because Indus River system will have a very different property of flow, very different availability of water flow as compared to, let's say, a Sabarmati, a Mahi, or a Narmada and a Tapi. A Ganga river or a river as mighty as Brahmaputra will have very different characteristics of flow as compared to a Kaveri, right? So that is why this is not very acceptable. That is why, for the general sake of classification, we go for the classification based on the origin. Okay. So here, when we talk about it, it generally is associated with based on origin. So based on origin, where it is originating, because when you think about the origin, that is very much responsible for the characteristic indicated by the rivers. So on this basis, you have the Himalayan drainage. Potwar Plateau is further to the northwest. Himalayan drainage. Then you have the peninsular drainage. Okay. Now, here, the rivers originating from the Himalayan region, they are consistently fed by the melting of ice and snow. Continuous melting of ice and snow that keeps on feeding the rivers there. That is why water available in this area is always going to be very significantly high. Throughout the year, you have the availability of water when it comes to Indus, Ganga, Brahmaputra. The maintenance of river flow will be maintained or will be observed throughout the year. In the case of peninsular drainage, the origin source is not because of melting of ice or snow. The source of origin is maybe in a region of a hill or a mountain where you have excessive amount of concentrated rainfall happening in an area. That is where you will get that kind of a origin of water, origin of streams, and then the formation of the river. So here you have water in the river accumulated due to rainfall, groundwater supply, etc. And here you have availability of water based upon the melting of snow. So this is where on the seasonal basis in the peninsular rivers, you will have fluctuations in the water flow. But here you will have perennial flow of water throughout the year. You will have substantial flow of water. Himalayan rivers, they will generally be bringing from the region of the Himalayas lot of sediments, lot of deposits, lot of eroded materials, and they will form fertile sedimentary plains where they can move in any direction. They can go for shifting of the courses, etc. But the peninsular drainage, they are much older than the Himalayan drainage, and they have by this time have got a kind of a predefined channel in the igneous rock formations, etc., where in that predefined channel they have a designated flow pattern associated. So that is basically the general classification of the river systems which is adopted. So Indian drainage system may be divided on the basis of discharge of water, where the Arabian Sea drainage and the Bay of Bengal drainage, that can be one of the classification. And they are separated through each other. If you go for this classification, then you can say that the Arabian Sea drainage, that is river Indus, Mahi, Sabarmati, Narmada, Tapi, amongst the major ones, they are separated from each other by the Delhi Ridge, the Aravalis, and the Sahyadris. Okay, that is the classification or the division between these serve as the water divide between the Arabian Sea drainage and the Bay of Bengal drainage. But the most accepted classification is on the basis of origin, and that is Himalayan drainage and the peninsular drainage, so that you can have unifying characteristics. When we talk about the Himalayan drainage, as we have seen, as we have already talked about, that in the case of the Himalayan rivers, they originate from very high above in the mountains, from the snow-capped peaks. Generally, the origin is always from a particular glacier, melting of snow and ice, and that feeds the water throughout the year. Now, as these rivers come down the slope of these lofty mountains, they will have a very accelerated speed, very high speed. And that is when, as they come down the slope with a very high speed, they will continue to erode the base, right? So that is where they will end up carving very deep valley-like structures. Vertical down cutting will be very common. So canyons, gorges, valleys, these are very common feature in the case of the Himalayan drainage. And then after that, because they are going to bring such huge amount of eroded materials as they're coming down the slope with a high speed, they will be able to erode the rocks very efficiently. And that is why, due to the high amount of sedimentary load, they will form a very vast and fertile sedimentary plain as well. And in that case of a vast and fertile sedimentary plain, the rivers can form meanders. They will be very broad and wide. For example, take a look at River Brahmaputra in the Assam plains. Now, in the Assam plains, River Brahmaputra becomes so very wide, so very broad, that particularly during the rainy season, you stand on one side of the river bank, the other side of the river bank won't even be visible to you. That is how broad River Brahmaputra gets. Right. So that is the characteristic. In the case of the peninsular drainage, they generally, you will find rivers are superimposed in nature. Right. So here, generally, they have a predefined river channel between the igneous rocks. So they don't have the ability to shift their courses or randomly form a kind of a meandering course or oxbow lake system that is only to be found in the Himalayan drainage. Now, one of the characteristics that you find in the case of the Himalayan rivers, especially in the rivers, mostly in the eastern part, that is the shifting of the rivers. The Himalayan rivers, they are known notoriously to be shifting their courses. And that is based upon the kind of sedimentary rock formations that you have, and that gives them a sedimentary, not always rock formations, but even sedimentary soil deposits that allows the rivers to shift their courses, but also due to the huge sedimentary load. For example, here take the case of River Kosi. This is the case of River Kosi. River Kosi, which is also known as the sorrow of Bihar. Why? Because causes devastating level of floods. The type of floods that River Kosi causes, where multiple different habitations, multiple different villages, etc., they completely disappear overnight. Right? For those people who have not seen those floods, it is something of unimaginable proportions. Floods, when they occur anywhere else, now various different rivers have the ability to cause floods, but River Kosi has got an unparalleled level of causing floods. Why? Because it simply shifts its course. So here, for example, observe this river course. Now, in the 1730s, the River Kosi would follow this particular pathway. Okay. In the 1800s, the river would follow this particular pathway. Again, in 1800s, the river would flow through this pathway also. Through this pathway also. Through this, then 1900s through this pathway. Right. Now think about it. Let's suppose you are living in a place, you have settled, your family has settled down in a place which is 100 kilometers away from the river bank. Obviously, you won't feel the threat or the danger of the flood so often because you are more than 100 kilometers from the river bank. Let's suppose one fine morning that you wake up, you find the full force of the river coming towards your house and basically taking away the entire settlement around you, everything around you. And that becomes the new course of the river. So that is why here the floods which are caused, oftentimes they are of the proportion of a national disaster. They are declared at the level of national disaster. Hundreds and thousands of people, lakhs of people basically have lost their lives due to the flooding of River Kosi over a due course of time. So here, why is it that the river shifts its courses? Why is it the case? So basically, let's suppose if we talk about the river channel and the floodplains, let's suppose this is the floodplain. Let's suppose this is the floodplain. And this is where you have the river channel, where the river is in motion, where the river is in existence. Okay. Let's assume you have settlements all around. To the far off places also you have settlements, habitations. Habitations will come up over a period of time, People need to grow crops, people need to pursue agriculture, so the habitations will always come over. Okay. Now, this river will bring down high amount of sedimentary load. Very high amount of sedimentary load will be brought by the river, because it has got that force coming down the mountains. It has got, and Koshi is one of those rivers which is joined by 7 main tributaries, and all of them, they have a significant load carrying capacity. All of them have significant amount of erosional materials that they carry. Now, over a period of time, these erosional materials, they will get deposited here on the river channel. The sedimentary materials brought by the river, they will get deposited on the river channel, they will get deposited on the sides also, in the floodplains also. Right. Now, that means over a period of time, what will you observe? You will observe that the river water slightly goes up. But eventually, over, let's say, few years, 4 years, 5 years, more deposit will happen. More deposit will happen. So what do you find? That there is not enough space available for the flow of the river, right? The to accommodate all the water, river channel doesn't have enough space. So if I show you this particular image, you will observe that the divergence of the river channel here is not very much. At the lower portion, the divergence in the river channel is very high, but not in the upper portion. So let's suppose you have the river draining from here. Now here sedimentary deposits on the river channel is very high. The river doesn't have enough space to flow in that area. So what will be the tendency? The river water will need an exit path. Always river water will need an exit path. So maybe it finds a low-lying area nearby and it starts moving from there. As the river will move from there, then more water will come, more erosion will happen, the channel will deepen and deepen and deepen, and eventually that becomes the main channel of the flow. The earlier channel is left as a kind of a remnant floodplain where eventually deposits would have created a kind of a plain region. Right. So here, as the river finds very restricted flow availability, so here maybe the river starts flowing from here. Habitations, settlements, everything gets flooded. Over a period of time, channel deepening will happen here also. The river will erode this region also. Channel deepening will happen, and this becomes the main flow of the river. So that is where the river simply is having the, or has got the ability to simply shift its course. This is why the floods oftentimes in the eastern India are at a much more devastating scale, much more devastating scale. If you have been an inhabitant of the region of Assam, in certain parts of West Bengal, in certain parts of Bihar, eastern UP, you would be knowing this, that whenever these floods happen, after the floods, if you go to that area, but during the time of the floods, if you go to that region, you won't be able to distinguish. It will appear like a sea, right? The entire region will only be covered with water. All the various different type of structures, they will be carried by the brute force of the river. So it will appear like a flattened sea of sorts. Here and there, you will have some tree which is left standing, and that too, the trees also, think about it, the trees are totally submerged. That is the level of flooding which happens. Imagine a tree near you, and imagine if the water level goes higher than the tree also. So many of the trees are completely submerged. So that is when, after the floods, if you go there, highways, major highways, railway tracks, which would have been in use, everything simply is uprooted to a level where you won't even be able to figure out that ever there was a road connectivity in that area. This is one of the reasons why infrastructure connectivity in the region of Brahmaputra, in the region of North Bihar, in the region of North Bengal, in the region of Eastern UP, infrastructure has not been developed in such a way because of these frequent floods. It is only quite recently where we are building resilient infrastructure, where we are spending more money and bringing about infrastructure which can actually tolerate all this, right? So that is something which we have learned. We, as in we Indians, have learned in a very hard way, and that is one of the reasons why here you will also have a lot of fertile soil, but also a significant degree of impoverishment in all these areas. Other than agriculture, you cannot carry out any other process. And in agriculture, also, you will have restricted time of growth because for around 1 month or 1.5 months, your region will be completely covered in floods. This also gives rise to waterborne diseases. It gives rise to various different illnesses. And in the social indicators, also, the performance is very, very bad for all these areas, right? So it is interconnected in that way. Okay. Now, so that is basically the case of the shifting of rivers, which does happen. Now, we come to the floods in the Himalayan drainage. A similar concept, but every year. During the time, just like every year, during the month of November, December, every year, we discuss about the Delhi pollution. Similarly, every year in the month of June and July, and even in parts of August, you will come across debilitating floods which would have covered large areas of the Himalayan drainage, causing significant and substantial amount of destruction. Now, Brahmaputra plains, Ganga plains, they experience these floods on a regular basis. So, why is it that floods occur in the Himalayan drainage to such a large proportion, and that too year after year? The logic and the reason is very simple. But here, first you think about it, uh, how to mitigate these types of disasters. I'll come to it. Kosi Saurav Bihar, yes. Is it mean that in older path of the river flow, there is no water flowing when yes. When the river takes a new path, then the older path gets dried out, or you will have small kind of lake and pond formation. Over a period of time, multiple floods would have deposited sediments in that area where it would be very difficult to distinguish that, okay, this is the region where in 1700s the river would have flowed from that area. It becomes almost impossible to discern that. Okay. Why do the river change their course? What is it that we talked about just now? Isn't it that what we talked about just now? Sometimes I feel that we are in a time capsule, that suddenly somebody wakes up and, okay, no. So rivers change their course because there is oftentimes a significant amount of deposition in the main channel where the capacity of the flow of water is not maintained anymore. And that is why river finds a nearest and the next low-lying depressed area where it can flow. And that is why it tends to shift its course. Is that why there is a restriction in place for sand mining from rivers? Yes. Sand mining has got other different impact also. For example, wherever you will come across sand mining, now that will dig up the sand mining mafias. What they do is they dig up the sand from the river beds. Now, oftentimes that exposes the groundwater. So for a brief moment, you will have excess amount of flow, but within a couple of seasons, even the groundwater in that region will dry up. So the entire area will witness drought-like conditions, very dry conditions. Crop failures will be very common. Other than that, as you would have seen in River Luni, if you have not seen that, River Luni in Rajasthan is an ideal case where we are killing the river, where over the past few years we have virtually strangulated River Luni. It is like we are throwing an open challenge to the nature that try to have a flow if we do this. So what people do is, let's suppose you have a river which is draining in this manner. If you take a cross-sectional view, this is the cross-sectional view. So they will dig up sand from here, right? Sand they will be able to carry out because that is what they require, but sometimes there will be large rocks also that is not of any use to them. So they will start dumping it here itself. Okay, they will dump that deposit here itself. Now that destroys the local slope topography. So the river will no longer have the ability to flow in that path. So the river is restricted in the form of few lakes and ponds rather than a river channel and a continuous river flow. Maybe during the rainy season, excess flow happens, there will be flooding and the channel will be maintained. But again, when the floods recede, the sand mining mafia will be back at it. That is now, this is a feature which was very common in the northern part of the country. But over the past few years, this is a feature which has been prevalent, increasingly prevalent in the southern part of the country as well. And why this illegal sand mining is done is in order to fuel the construction industry. And you know how powerful the construction and the builder industry is, particularly to the south of Vindhyas. They carry a real political heft, right from the region of Maharashtra southwards. If you talk about the construction mafia and the builder mafia, you cannot have enough and more power than what they wield. So there, because the sand mining is directly linked to them, and because that particular builder mafia is associated with the political power in place, that is why it always goes scot free. Recently, you had a couple of months back a very good and a detailed article which appeared in Down to Earth and Print. Also, simultaneously did carry out a study, and the Print also brought out that article where it talked about that impact of sand mining in River Luni, and it talked about the fact that all the various different political parties, they get support from that. So they get one or the other person here or there, they will get some money from that. So sand mining mafia goes scot free in the region of Rajasthan, and it is the people who will suffer from incessant droughts in the coming days. Okay, so that is the case of this particular sand mining. Then isn't the shifting of Kosi has been happening very fast compared to geological time scale? It is, it is, and that is primarily because of the huge sedimentary, the various different tributaries, the Saptakoshi as it is referred to, they carry huge amount of sediments. If they are clear sand, then river will doesn't change its path. Yes, Dikshit, correct, right? Okay, and rejuvenation of the river is generally asked in the optional area, but you should understand rejuvenation is basically, let's suppose the river is moving at a very slow speed. At this level, the river is moving at a slow speed. Let's suppose due to an endogenic force, here the land subsides. So the river will straight away gain some force, right? Which was moving at a very slow speed, suddenly it will gain some force. That is river rejuvenation. Recently, an officer has been killed in Bihar in the sand mining. It is a consistent process. It is a consistent ill that you have. You would have come across those sad stories in the Gwalior Morena belt, the Chambal belt of Madhya Pradesh. Those of you belonging from there, in the Morena Bamor area, you had the sand mining mafia who had the guts to crush down even IPS officers. IPS officers, basically, they are thought to be very significantly immune to the threats around. They were crushed to death under these tractors. So they basically have a kind of a scot-free thing that do what I will do. And that is where the officials, particularly in Bihar, if you have any of the your relatives, any of your seniors who are in the bureaucracy in Bihar, or any of them who is a politician, they will tell you that one of the maximum amount of bribe which changes hand is basically to get a posting in the areas of the river where the river flows, because there are twin benefits associated with it. First is sand mining. The second is, so sand mining gives you revenue. Being an officer of the state government, it gives you illegal sand mining. They will give you tribute, they will give you revenue. Other thing is that floods are very consistent. Now has basically uh, accustomed itself to the fact that there will be flood, right? And people are used to it. So better let that a common factor. Floods will occur. Once the floods occur, after that comes what? Comes the distribution of relief materials. That is where significant amount of money is siphoned off, significant amount of money changes hand, way beyond what you and I can imagine. I will just give you a proportion of that, or an idea of that. I cannot give you a proportion of that ever. So basically, I'll just give you an idea of that. At the level of an inspector, think about it. An inspector, I'm not even talking about a kind of DSP or an SP in the police. At the level of an inspector, and many of the politicians have basically also said that they basically will use all their power to get posted on the case of a river channel, or where a river bed is present, because they end up making close to around 2 to 5 crores within 6 months to 1 year. Think about it. Six to or around 2 to 5 crores within 1 year. So even if they get posted there for a couple of years, and they're very open about it, that what is the worst that will happen? There will be an investigation which will happen. I will be suspended. Fair enough. I would have made so much amount of money. After 2 years of suspension, I will come back. I will resume my job. I will carry out whatever it is. So that is the case almost now everywhere where the river is in existence. So think about it. If the inspector stands to make that much amount of money, what is the amount of money that reaches the higher levels? So that is where all the posting things in various states, you will always find that the politicians say that that person is taking money for posting. Why is it that people take so much money to post an officer from one region to another? They tend to earn a lot, right? So that is basically the case of the sad situation of the river channels in the country. Even though IS and IPS are more powerful officers and with permanent power, still why these officers are afraid of politicians? When you reach Labasna, when you do, if you do, one of the first things that they tell you, that the real power is with the politicians. They are the real executive. You are there to support them. You are not there. IAS and IPS officers, they never will be able to trump the level of the elected leaders, because in a democracy, elected leaders, they hold the sway. You represent the will of the people, the elected leaders, and the bureaucracy is a way or a conduit to implement. That is one of the first lessons that they teach you in Labasna, or the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Administrative Academy. They tell you, never entangle with a politician. Never do that, because they are the ones who will wield real power. What is the highest level that you go to? Highest, let's suppose you get promoted, you get selected as an IS officer at the age of 24. You are very upright. You have a good educational background. You have a very good kind of everything. By the age of 55 or 50, or maybe 55, you will be elevated to the level of chief secretary at the state. Chief secretary is the biggest IS officer at the state. An individual who has come into politics maybe 4 to 5 years earlier, that person gets elected to the position of chief minister. That person will will immediately has the capacity to pick you up, move you somewhere else. Look at what has happened in the case of multiple different states. I won't take the name of the states. You have the election commission taking a kind of a disciplinary action on the DGP of police in Telangana. Why is that the case? Because even before the final results were declared, they basically went ahead and submitted, or they basically went ahead and provided flowers to the new boss. You have to keep the new bosses happy. So the election commission took action against them. So that is always the case. Real power is always wielded by the politicians, right? I hope you have that reality in mind. I hope you don't have that kind of a misconception that once I become IS officer, there will be the prime minister and I will be the next person. Together, we will decide the future course of the nation. That never happens. I hope that is something which you all are aware of, right? So, here, now, we come to the floods in Himalayan drainage. But, sir, is it wrong? It is absolutely wrong. It is absolutely wrong, but it is a human nature. You will find it present everywhere. Go to the most developed nations of the world, you'll find that to be present. a person who becomes popular and who becomes elected. That is the very nature of democracy. That is why it is said democracy is flawed, but it is the best form of governance that you have, right? So here, when we talk about the Himalayan drainage, so the Himalayas, they originate from the mighty mountains, or rather the rivers originate from the mighty mountains, and then they flow down. Does anyone pay for the rank also in UPSC? If you have that much amount of money, donate it. It doesn't work in UPSC. You will find endless stories about it, that they asked me money, I could not pay, hence I did not become IAS officers. Only those people will say who basically have to flaunt about it. This doesn't work in UPSC. That is why UPSC has been there. UPSC has been there. The civil services, why have they remained so valid and so relevant even after 200 years since Cornwallis brought into the picture, right? Why everybody trusts it? Because it is, in a way, very reliable. State services, you don't trust that so much after a point of time. But now even they are becoming very, very transparent. Coming back to it. So here, when we talk about this, floods in Himalayan drainage. So during the rainy season, what happens? So before that, in general, the river, when it moves, the river comes down the mountain slopes, carries high amount of sedimentary load. Let's suppose during the rainy season, when we talk about the rainy season here, there is significant amount of rainfall, concentrated and accumulated amount of rainfall here. Right? Now, this accumulated and concentrated amount of rainfall would mean what? It would basically mean that here the amount of water which is flowing, that amount of water becomes very high. That flow becomes very high. Right? So as the flow pattern becomes very high, as the amount of water flow becomes very high, what is the consequence of this? The consequence is basically, with more mass of water, there will be greater momentum. So the erosional power will increase. So during the rainy season, there will be more erosional power. So during rains, more water is carried, means more momentum, means more erosion. More erosion means the streams will carry larger amount of eroded materials now, very large amount of eroded materials now. So what will be the consequence here? Let's suppose you talk about the river plain here, or the flood plain of a river. Again, the simple concept that we studied in the shifting of river. If this is the river channel and this is the flood plain on the sides, here let's suppose you have the habitations far away, right? Let's suppose you have these habitations which are significantly far away. Now, it is here that the river water is carried. It is in this that the river water flows, the river channel. Now, when you have this situation of excess amount of erosion, means more sedimentary materials are carried, these will be deposited within the river channel itself. These will be deposited within the river channel itself. As they will get deposited within the river channel, the space available for the river will decrease, it will lower down. So then it might not immediately flood, but let's suppose next year also more deposits will happen. Now that means the space available in the river channel for the flow is very, very less. So that is where the river will start immediately to overflow. And as it starts overflowing, it will flood a very large area. As it starts to overflow, it will flood a very large proportion. So a very large area gets submerged, it gets drowned. So that is the case of the flood. Every year, the Himalayan drainage nowadays, because of uneven amount of rainfall, unequal amount of rainfall, and because of the the cases of illegal construction activities, etc., happening, even in the southern part of the country, which earlier used to be devoid of floods, even in southern part of the country now you come across very heavy amount of flooding, right? All of you living in the region of eastern Maharashtra, even in Tamil Nadu nowadays, ask your grandparents. They would recall that, okay, once I had seen that flood in 60s, once I had seen that flood in the 70s, but that's it. Now it floods every year. Why? Because now, again, the construction is being carried out, illegal construction on the floodplains, etc., that you carry out. You deposit, you throw the debris, and the runoff deposits that excess debris into the river channel, reducing the amount of flow. So that is why these floods happen. So what is the way to prevent these floods? Understand, there can be two different types of questions asked from here: how to mitigate the damage caused by the flood, and how to prevent the flood. Both of them are very different. Prevent the flood is to ensure a situation where the flooding never occurs. Mitigate the damage due to flood is that if a flooding incident occurs, then what to do so that the damage is not very high. So when we talk about, let's suppose, how to mitigate the event of flood, how to ensure that flooding never occurs. First things first, you need to ensure maintenance of river channel. Maintenance of river channel. Of river channel. How do you maintain a river channel? You basically ensure that the flow is maintained. You desilt, carry out the desilting process. Desilting process. If you carry it out regularly in a scientific manner, rivers have the capacity, the channels have the capacity to take that much water. So they will not flood, right? Now, then, furthermore, the floodplains should be left undisturbed. It is generally, in the case of the floods, the immediate riverbeds and the close floodplains, they always get flooded. In various different master plans for the various cities, they will always tell you, they will always indicate to you that the flooding is basically occurring in the floodplain region. Floodplains should be left undisturbed because that is the region created by the natural variation in the water flow. So leave the floodplains undisturbed. Floodplains should be left undisturbed. But what happens? For example, take the case of any of the major city. Take the case of Delhi, for example. Now, Delhi is the ideal example for this. In Delhi, over a period of time, what has happened that the people who come in, the migrants especially who come in, now what they do, they basically, they don't find an adequate amount of accommodation in areas of Delhi, so they start settling in the floodplains. Now once they have settled in the floodplains, that is where they will build their small hutments, slums come up. Along with that, they carry out agriculture, cultivation, because that land, nobody is there to claim that land in the floodplain right next to the river and fertile sediment. So they start carrying agriculture and they make a earning out of it. Very soon, more people will come. more people will come, then more people will settle across the floodplains. That means more deposits from these floodplains will come into the river channel, obstructing the river flow in that case. And during the rainy season, that will be flooded. This will carry on for 1 year, 2 year, after 3 years, before an election comes. Any of the major cities in that matter, before an election comes, the that illegal or the unauthorized colonies will be given legal status. Then now that has been an official established colony on the side of the river bank, which should never have happened. So that is how slowly and steadily in the banks of river Yamuna, observe the amount of construction which has been carried on. These hutments, these shanties, which are the slums which are built, then people will fetch, once it is regularized, after that, the land will be sold for multi crores. There will be the builders who will come over, more deposits into the river channel. So this is why floodplain in every city's master plan, floodplain should be declared as no development zone. It is declared as no development zone in majority of the master plans, but it is not implemented. Then after that, maintenance of green cover along the river banks, maintenance of green cover along the river banks. So that means the presence of trees across the river banks. Why that is important? Because if you don't have trees, then as the river flow increases, then during the seasonal variation, the river cuts down the sand across the sides. The river will cut down the sediments. It will erode, what is referred to as a stream bank erosion. It will start eroding from the sides. And the consequence of it will be that all that sand, all the deposited material will be accumulated in the central flow of the river. That means the river will eventually have to flood over, right? So that is why, to prevent erosion, that is a must. Then one other thing which can be done is construction of emergency canals for flow of excess water during rains, what are also known as the diversion canals, right? So that if there is excess amount of rainfall, that water simply exits from the region of the canals. So these can be the methodologies which can be adopted. These can be the methodologies which can basically be taken over, so in order to prevent the flood, right? But then the problem is that this desilting process, etc., this is not carried out in the name of the cost, that it will be costly, and the state governments will say that we cannot afford that. It is a different matter altogether, that if you combine the overall cost, that in terms of lives, property, etc., that the government basically has to dole out during the time of the floods, it is very high. But then that basically comes from the various relief funds, so the government doesn't have to pay for it immediately. And that is why this maintenance is not done on a regular basis, due to which floods occur year after year. Okay. Now there is another thing, that is about construction of embankments. Aditya, as you have pointed out, embankments are what? Embankments are basically constructions across the river bank that you do, whereby you provide a kind of a barrier that water will not cross this particular embankment. Now, this is also listed as a measure to control floods, but there is a disadvantage associated with that. And the disadvantage is, so when we talk about construction of embankments, fair enough, you can add a point to that, construction of embankments. But the disadvantage in this case is If you don't maintain the river bed, if you don't maintain the river channel, eventually during one or the other rainy season, the time will come when the water will be full up till here. And in that case, if this structure breaks, the embankment breaks, the flood will be of humongous proportion. The flood will be much more vicious than what your normal floods will be, because then you have that large potential energy of stored water immediately getting converted into kinetic energy, and that will cause devastation almost unparalleled. So if, let's suppose, the river will find a low lying area, it can shift. But if the river doesn't find another competing low lying area, the river will continue to move as it is. Okay, another thing that you can do is interlinking of the rivers. Interlinking of rivers. Okay, that is another factor that you can bring into place. Dams, yes, dams, small dams you can build, but that nowadays is not considered very eco-friendly, because it basically prevents the flow of the river. It hampers the kind of aquatic life that you find in the river. Then the river starts getting much more polluted, because the general flow of the river has the tendency to carry away the pollutants. But when you build dams, damming of the river, so that has got severe disadvantages. That is why, if you observe, for example, River Damodar, which is referred to as, which was at one point of time referred to as the sorrow of Bengal. It would cause devastating floods in the region of Bengal. That was the flow. Now, immediately after independence, one of the first major dams that was built, the first multi-purpose river valley project which was built, was the Maithan Dam. Maithan Dam, which stands almost at the border of the present-day Jharkhand and Bengal. Now, after that, a series of dams were built. Take a look at River Damodar today. It basically resembles a small stream now, right? Because the flow has been so very disturbed, and then accumulated with the event of sand mining. That river is on the verge of getting disappeared. At one point of time, you had a thriving river system there. So much so that River Damodar would deposit sediments on the sides, and that basically would be the areas of rich jute production. But now, due to construction of various different dams along the way, that has basically reduced it to a kind of a stream-like flow. So dams also are now being looked at with a great amount of, in a way, skepticism, a great amount of reservation that it can cause long-term damage also. Okay, so this is how you can basically prevent the floods from occurring. Uh, right. So I hope that is understood. Digging of excess deposits, that is the maintenance of river channel. Okay, so that is about the occurrence of regular floods in the region of the portion of the Himalayas. We'll carry on further with the river systems of India. We'll come back after the break and we will move ahead with this. So let's take a break and let's be back. Dams have some benefit, Rajneesh, but not so significant now. It is better that it at a lower cost you maintain the river channel. Dams have the benefit that you get accumulated water for irrigation supply, drinking water supply, for you can develop fisheries also, you can basically generate electricity also. So dams have those benefits, but the associated cost can be very high. It can cause reservoir induced earthquakes, it can cause the disappearance of the river channel altogether. So multiple impacts can be there. Okay, let's take a break and let's be back in 10 minutes. A confirmation about the audio, please, if the audio is clear and available. Thank you. So now let us take a look at the peninsular drainage. So when we talk about the peninsular drainage, it is much more older than the Himalayan drainage. It is very, very old because the peninsular region in itself is much older than the Himalayan river system. And it is evidenced by the fact that you have the large, shallow valleys, which are not very deep, not significant amount of deep vertical down cutting is there, because the swiftness of the river or the speed of the river is not very high. Now, Western Ghats running close to the western coast acts as a water divide, where it ensures that the rivers either drain to the west or to the east. But majority of the rivers which originate close to the Western Ghats, owing to the slope of the peninsular plateau, which is from west to east, they end up emptying their water into the region of Bay of Bengal. Now then, when we talk about the peninsular rivers, they are characterized by a fixed course, absence of meanders, and non-perennial flow of water. That is the general characteristic, the general feature. Okay. Again, let me tell you that tomorrow we will have an extra session. Okay. Tomorrow we will have an extra session. And okay, what is the timing that you would prefer? Okay. Many of you are requesting 6:30 or 7. Should we start the session at 7? The same time? Same time? Okay. Fair enough. We'll start it at the same time. Okay. See, I have many of you are saying 7, but then I think majority of them are saying the same time. Right. In case there is college exam, then you won't be it won't be comfortable for you either at 6 or 7. So that is not valid anymore. Right. But okay. Fair enough. I'll do that also. I'll say two options I'll give you: 6, 7. Let me see. There is no correct answer in this case. Or let me put a correct answer then. Let me see. Majority of you are of 6 a.m., so we will mostly be starting at 6 a.m. only. A kind of a very divided thing. 58% of you are adhering to 6 a.m. So in a democratic setup, we will go with 6 a.m. and we will start the session with from 6 a.m. We'll try to continue it as much as it is comfortable for you guys. Well, I will give you multiple breaks tomorrow. Don't worry about it. We will try to carry it on till 10:30 at max. And as long as we are comfortable, and because we are talking about Indian geography, the portions are very relatable. That is what gives you some amount of leeway to stretch also. So as much as it is possible within your human capacity, we will take a session from 6 a.m. Right? Swaroop, mostly that will be the time, mostly. Okay. Tomorrow we will try to cover the portion of agriculture. For that, we need a detailed discussion. We need to have you to be looking at a larger picture of it. So that is where in agriculture, because agriculture, if you study in different silos, oftentimes the larger picture is not clear. So I want you to have a better understanding about what are the issues in agriculture, etc. So as again, I will say, as long as you are comfortable, I'll try to stretch it up, but when it reaches your saturation limit, I will end it up. And does not mean I know when it reaches the saturation limit and when you guys are simply lazy and sleepy. So basically, we will take a judgment call accordingly. Now, peninsular rivers are characterized by a fixed course, absence of meanders, and non-perennial flow of water. Narmada and Tapi are the exceptions, where rather than draining from west to east, they drain to the east to west direction. They make estuaries rather than deltas. Now, again, let me ask you: in the eastern coast, will we be able to find estuaries? Yes or no? Across the eastern coastline. Good. You will find estuaries even across the eastern coast. You will find deltas also across the eastern coast. But across the western coast, no delta, only estuaries. Okay, so across the eastern coast, you will find very fertile delta also. Estuary also will be formed in various different areas. But in the western coast, only estuaries, no delta. Okay, right? Now, here there is a kind of a classification for your revision purposes for your examination, the difference between the Himalayan and the peninsular drainage system. When you talk about the Himalayan drainage system, if you observe this, use it for your revision purposes for your prelims here. Okay. So basically, if you take a look at it, place of origin, the Himalayan rivers, the Himalayan mountain is covered with glaciers, the peninsular region that originates basically from the Peninsular Plateau and the Central Highlands, that is around the Amarkantak, Vindhya, Satpura region. Now, Himalayan rivers, they are perennial because they get water from the melting of ice and snow. Peninsular rivers, they are highly seasonal. Himalayan rivers, they are either consequent, antecedent, subsequent also, dendritic pattern will be very common. Here you will find superimposed, rejuvenated because of multiple different upliftment and subsidence of land, trellis, radial, and rectangular drainage patterns. Here you will have long course flowing through rugged mountains, experiencing erosion, river capturing everything. Here, smaller fixed course, very large basins. Himalayan rivers are very young, youthful, active, and deepening of valleys are happening. Peninsular rivers are very, very old. Now, now we take a look at the river systems one by one, starting with the northernmost river system of the country. This difference is not asked in the mains examination, no. That kind of a difference is restricted in your class 10th board exam. That's it. Beyond that, this kind of a question is not for subjective levels. Now, when we talk about the river systems in the country, the northernmost and the most prominent river system is the Indus River system. Indus River system basically is one of those which, when we say a river system, we basically drainage system, we talk about the river along with its tributaries. So when we talk about the Indus River system, we are talking about the area covered by river Indus and its tributaries as well. So that is where, in the case of the Indus River system, you will find that it covers four different countries. One, where it originates, that is in the region of Tibet, that is in the region of the Mansarovar Lake, the Bokharchu Glacier in Mansarovar Lake, near Mansarovar Lake, in the Kailash ranges, Bokharchu Glacier in Kailash range. Okay, so there it originates. Then, if you take a look at the flow, so after originating from there, here is where it will originate. Then after that, it drains in the northward direction, northwestward direction. And in the northwestern direction, as it drains, it is joined by the various different tributaries. Then eventually after that, you will find that this river takes a southward bend, crossing the Karakoram, and it crosses the Himalayas, Karakoram as well. Meanwhile, it is joined by tributaries such as River Kabul, which basically comes all the way from the region of Afghanistan, right? So here it starts draining, then it moves into this area and eventually forms a fertile delta into the Sindh region of Pakistan before it merges with the Arabian Sea. In the region of the Arabian Sea, it also forms a submarine canyon in that area. Now here, before we move ahead into this, a basic concept about the tributaries. When we talk about the tributaries of the river, any tributary of the river, so tributaries of the river, they can be classified as left bank and right bank. Left bank and right bank tributaries. What are these? So when we talk about left bank tributaries, these are the ones which join the river from the left hand side or the left bank. The right bank, basically we join the river on the right side. So how do you decide which is a left bank and which is a right bank tributary? Let's suppose you have a river which is flowing in this direction. You have a tributary A which comes from here and tributary B which comes from here. Right. In this case, again, if I ask you which is going to be the left bank tributary, I will launch a poll for that. Which is going to be the left bank tributary in this case? Very good. So most of us are aware of this. Very nice. Okay, good. So A is the left bank. How do you decide that? So basically, always, just like in the case of the wind, in the wind, how we decide left side and the right side, similar concept is also used here. Let's suppose you talk about movement of a river. Now put yourself here. Let's suppose you put yourself here and look into the direction where the river is flowing. So think about it that the river is flowing in front of you, right, away from you, and you are standing in the direction or facing the direction of the river flow. Now, as the river is flowing, your right hand side will be the right bank, your left hand side will be the left bank. So, this is basically when you take a look towards the direction of the flow, then you get the idea of left bank and right bank tributaries. So, here the river Indus has got multiple different right bank tributaries. Shyok, Hunza, Gilgit, Kabul, all of these are right bank tributaries, right? Now, left bank tributaries of river Indus are the famous Panjnad, what are referred to as the Panjnad. Panjnad basically means five rivers. It is after this name that the land got named as Punjab. The undivided Punjab was the land where these five rivers would be draining. So that is basically Jhelum, Chenab, Satluj, Ravi, and Beas. Okay, these are the five very important left bank tributaries of river Indus. They join river Indus in the area of Mithankot in Pakistan. That is where they end up joining. Okay, in this case, Ravi and Beas, they originate very close to the region of the Rohtang Pass, the where you have the Rohtang tunnel now, the Atal tunnel. In that region itself, in the close vicinities from different sides, obviously, Ravi and Beas, they come through. They are very, very important drainage systems in the region of Himachal and Punjab, where they are not only very swift and fast moving, they carve deep valleys, right? Kullu Valley, etc. They get created by these rivers. And eventually, basically, you will observe that they also serve very fertile plains across the region of Punjab. If you go to the region around Jandiala, Kapurthala, beyond Jalandhar in Punjab, Bias is one of the lifelines, important lifelines there, right? Satluj. Satluj is a river which again is an antecedent river. Satluj originates from the region of, again, Mansarovar Lake in the Kailash ranges. That is where even river Satluj originates from. Okay. And then this river Satluj basically enters India through the region of Shipkila Pass. through the region of Shipkila Pass is where River Satluj will enter. Shipkila Pass is present in the region of Himachal Pradesh. It will enter here. For a long period of time, around 120 kilometers or more, River Satluj forms the border between India and Pakistan. These are what are known as natural frontiers, or the concept of natural border that you study if you will study the optional portion of geography. That is where it is said natural frontier or natural boundary, where a river carves out a kind of a natural boundary there. River Ravi also is one of those rivers which forms a natural frontier here. If you observe this, this also forms a natural frontier, particularly around the region of Gurdaspur district. That is where River Ravi will form a natural frontier between India and Pakistan. Now, Beas is one of those rivers which entirely lies in India itself. It does not drain into Pakistan. Now, when you talk about Chenab, now Chenab originates as two different streams, that is Chandra and Bhaga streams, right? And they originate and then eventually they basically move through the Dhauladhar, and then eventually here, if you observe this Chenab river, basically that is where this river is also significantly powerful, and then it comes there. River Jhelum originates from the Verinag Glacier, and River Jhelum then eventually drains into the region of Pakistan where it joins River Chenab. So these are your Panjnad rivers. It is based on this that you had the entire civilization in this area which settled thousands of years back. That is why this is a land which has always been very bountiful. This is a land which has always yielded very high results. And that is why this is a land which has always been prosperous, because the land is so very fertile. Because in the very close vicinity, you have very fertile deposits created by this. Okay. Now, they carve out very deep valleys and gorges, by the way. Very beautiful as well. If ever you do happen to visit the areas for River Ravi, the even River Beas, not in the lower course in Punjab, River Beas becomes inconsequential significantly, but River Satluj, River Ravi, River Chenab, River Jhelum for that matter, that is again one of the most beautiful places and beautiful sites that you will come across. So, Indus River system is the largest river basins of the world, covering an area of 11 lakh 65,000 square kilometer and a total length of around 2880 kilometer. Now, I will ask you the basic question that generally you ask me. Will you need to, or do you need to learn all of this? That 11 lakh 65,000 square kilometer, 2880 kilometer in India, what is the catchment area or the square kilometer of this? Do you need to learn this? Good. So by the end of 24 modules, I will condition your mind in such a way that you will be afraid of learning anything. So basically, this is not required to be learned at all. Okay. See, there are few things in UPSC that you will have no other alternative to but to learn, but try to keep that to the bare minimum. As much as to the bare minimum you keep it, the better it is. Right. So there, basically you will observe that in India it lies, you have the extent of it in India only to around 3,21,000 square kilometer. The Indus, which is also known as the Sindhu, is the westernmost of the Himalayan rivers in India. Now it has got Himalayan tributaries such as the Shyok, Gilgit, Zaskar, Hunza, Nubra, Shigar, Dras. All of them are Himalayan tributaries. Now this is the river Shyok, this is the river Shyok here, right? Now here, you would have heard about the Galwan incident. You would have followed the Galwan incident so significantly. So, River Galwan, which is very narrow and a fast moving cold river in the Himalayas, that is basically a tributary of River Shyok. Okay, so that is why Shyok also see. So, whenever, let's suppose that, how do you approach the current affairs? Those of you who ask that, how do we approach the current affairs for geography? Let's suppose that Galwan incident happened. Now you were aware of the fact that it has happened across a river, Galwan. Search about it. You have the power of internet with you. Divert that internet for some time other than the normal searches that you put on the internet. So divert it for some time, and trust me, your laptop will not, or your system will not explode, your phone will not explode if you do that some productive searches in your internet. In fact, the internet will also be happy that finally something productive is happening. Do that. So find out where that river Galwan is flowing from, which is, it is the tributary of which particular river. Those kind of questions are asked. Let's suppose dams are in use. Now, which particular dam are we talking about? It is on the banks of which river? What are the major dams of the country? That's it. That much, at least that much awareness, if you create around yourself, that will be sufficient, right? So, as there are so many rivers in Pakistan, then why there is scarcity of food and water? Because, see, I won't be telling you about the scarcity of food, but the scarcity of water is something which was not always there. Again, I hate to bring you to the concept of history again, but you would have studied about the canal settlements in the 1870s and the canal revolts which happened in the 1870s in the undivided Punjab, where you had, it was in those areas of Punjab basically where all the canal waters from river Chenab, river Satluj would be given, and that was the agriculturally prosperous area. Whereas in these areas, in the other regions, for example, in the what lies in Indian Punjab now, that no one wanted to come there because you did not have that consistent a water supply. The problem which happened in the case of Pakistan was a lack of land reforms. Lack of land reforms means few of them will have very, very large lands, and most of the other ones will not have any land at all. So, as a result of that, due to that, administrative issues and eventual lack of investment meant lack of uh, irrigation facilities. That also meant eventually lack of significant crop productivity, lack of modern mechanism and mechanization. That is where it suffers from. On which basis we say Panjnad meet the Indus? We can also say Indus meets the Panjnad. That is also a perspective, that Ganga meets Yamuna. And in fact, basically, Bay of Bengal comes up till the region of Himalayas. But on a serious note, if you talk about it, then see on what basis we characterize that which is a tributary and which is the mainstream is the maintenance of the dominant characteristic of the stream. If the stream is able to maintain its dominant characteristic even beyond the point of confluence, that is the mainstream. For example, when we talk about the similar concept of river Ganga and Yamuna, now river Ganga is already coming from somewhere, river Yamuna is also coming from somewhere. If you observe the channel of river flow, the path of the river flow, if it is that very similar to that of river Ganga, if it is continued, or a continuum of what earlier river Ganga had shown as a pattern, then we say that Yamuna is a tributary. Let's suppose the further channel would have been same as river Yamuna had indicated, the channel depth, etc., would have been same as river Yamuna. We would have said that Ganga is the tributary. I hope that is understood. Seema. Is that understood now? Yes? Okay. Are there any water disputes between India and Pakistan? Yes, the Indus Water Treaty that has been arrived at. So you will study that in IR in significant detail about the Indus Water Treaty of 1960. World Bank was the negotiator, the third party in that case. And that is where the Western rivers, basically Western and Eastern rivers, that is the classification based on that. So here in this image, you can see the Eastern rivers, Satluj, Beas, and Ravi. Western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. So Western rivers, there you can have, India can use only some amount of water, but Eastern rivers, India has got full rights to it. So that is the difference. But the only problem is that Pakistan did not manage to construct dams or irrigation canals in the case of the Western rivers, which now they are doing. Okay. Now, here, the right bank tributaries of River Indus, basically, the ones which join it from the right hand side, Kabul, Khurram, Tochi, Gomal, Sangar, even Nubra, Gilgit, Shyok, right? All of them will be a kind of a right bank. The river which flows southwards and receives Panjnad, that is the Panjnad, they form the left bank tributaries, a little above the region of Mithankot. Okay, so This originates near the Bokharchu glacier around the area of Lake Mansarovar. Okay, so always advisable to keep that in mind. Your additional reading materials will consist of the origin of the rivers. And if you know about the origin of the rivers, earlier UPSC has asked about the match the following kind of a question there. So at least for the major rivers, advisable to know where they originate. Okay. Now, then we come to one of the larger river systems in the country, and also one of the very important river systems of the country when it comes to the cultural significance, the traditional reverence, and also in terms of the population that it is able to support. That is the Ganga River system. Now, this Ganga River system, it originates in the region of Gangotri from the Gomukh Glacier. And then basically, initially, you will find that the movement is in southwestern direction. Then after that, it takes a southern turn. Eventually, it is joined by various tributaries like Yamuna along the way. And then it drains eastward. Now, beyond the Rajmahal hills here, it takes a sudden southward bend. And there it will have a distributary in the form of River Hooghly. Right? River Hooghly, which drains to the region of Kolkata. So the famous Howrah Bridge is on River Hooghly. So basically, that is where it drains through. River Damodar, by the way, that you see here, which was also infamously referred to as the sorrow of Bengal. River Damodar is a tributary of River Hooghly. Okay. Now, Ganga is joined by multiple different left bank and right bank tributaries also. Amongst the left bank tributaries, initially you have the Ram Ganga. This is one of the first ones. This is your Ram Ganga. Let me use a different color. So, this is your Ram Ganga. Drains through the very famous Corbett Tiger Reserve. That is where River Ram Ganga drains through. Then you have Gomti, moves through the capital city of Lucknow, which also River Gomti would be the example of and a perfect poster child of pollution, that how a polluted water looks like. But then over the past few or a past decade or so, or more than that, you have had multiple successive state governments who have basically worked towards cleaning of the river Gomti. And now, if you go to Lucknow, everybody will advise you, and rightly so, to go to the Gomti river front. And that has been the work of multiple successive state governments there. Then you have River Ghagra. River Ghagra is an antecedent river here. River Ghagra is an antecedent river, right? Now, this also is joined by some tributaries such as Rapti, eventually in the later stage. Rapti would also be referred to as the sorrow of eastern UP because of the floods that it would cause. Ghagra joins Ganga in the region of Bihar. Then you have Gandak. Gandak also moves through the Champaran districts of Bihar. It joins River Ganga near Patliputra. Then you have River Kosi, which has got the seven famous tributaries and the very large alluvial fan that is created as it comes down the mighty mountains of the Himalayas. It is also antecedent in nature. Here you have another smaller river, that is River Mahananda, which for some period forms the border between Bihar and Bengal. That is River Mahananda. Right? Then after that, from the region of Sikkim around Kanchenjunga, you have the origin of River Tista. River Tista, strangely enough, up till the 1700s, River Tista's course or the flow would be like this. This would be the flow of River Tista. So up till 1700s, River Tista would be considered to be a tributary of River Ganga. But then after that, due to erosion, stream capturing, etc., it was captured by the mighty Brahmaputra. So River Tista basically is now a tributary of Brahmaputra, not the tributary of Ganga river system. Now, when we talk about this Ganga river system, as it originates, at that point of time, it is not known as Ganga. This river system, as it originates, basically, this originates in the form of Alaknanda, right? From the Satopant glacier near Badrinath, that is where the origin of Alaknanda happens. Bhagirathi is the one which originates from the region of Gangotri. Gangotri glacier near Gomukh, that is considered to be the origin of river Ganga, Bhagirathi. Now, Bhagirathi basically, but the melting of the Gomukh glacier supplies the water to Bhagirathi. Bhagirathi joins Alaknanda at the region of Dev Prayag. And beyond that, the river is known as River Ganga. After the confluence of Bhagirathi and Alaknanda, it is known as the river Ganga. Now, in the mountains of Uttarakhand, you have multiple such confluences of these smaller streams: Alaknanda, Mandakini, Dholi Ganga, and so on and so forth, Pindar Ganga. All of these, they join river Alaknanda at various places. And the points where the rivers they come together, the confluence of the rivers, that is also what is famously referred to as Prayag, right? So Uttarakhand is famous for the Panj Prayag network, where you have the famous five confluences. All of them are places of worship. All of them are basically places of devotion. So Ganga river system rises in the Gangotri glacier near Gomukh in the Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand. Here it is known as Bhagirathi. At Dev Prayag, Bhagirathi meets Alaknanda. Thereafter, it is known as River Ganga. River Ganga, in its entirety of the stretch, drains through around 2,500 kilometers, shared by Uttarakhand, UP, Bihar, some portion of Jharkhand also, and West Bengal also. It passes through some portion of Jharkhand also. Alaknanda basically has its source in the Satopant glacier above the region of Badrinath. So that is where you have the Panch Prayag network and the Panch Prayag system. So this is your Panch Prayag. So observe here, this is where Alaknanda originates. This is where Alaknanda comes into existence. Now, this Alaknanda, first of all, is joined on the left hand side by Dholi Ganga at the region of Vishnu Prayag. Okay, Vishnu Prayag is where Dholi Ganga joins it. It is this river Dholi Ganga which experienced glacial lake outburst flood early last year. It is this Dholi Ganga whose flow has been interrupted by the Vishnugarh Tapovan hydel project by NTPC, which is causing issues in Joshimath also. So here you have the Vishnu Prayag. After that, as river Alaknanda moves with increased water flow, it is joined by Nandakini. Nandakini is a river which originates on the one side of the entire Nanda Devi mountain system. On one side of it, you have Nandakini which originates. It joins Alaknanda at Nandaprayag. Then, from the other side, different side of the mountain system, you have the Pindar Ganga. Which mountain system? The Nanda Devi mountain system. You have the Pindar Ganga, which is in existence, and the Pindar Ganga joins Alaknanda at the region of Karnaprayag. After that, as this water flows, it is joined by Mandakini. Mandakini originates from the region of Kedarnath. It is this particular river which went through a violent spate, and significant substantial amount of landslides occurred across this area. Cloudbursts occurred across the region of Kedarnath, and it was Mandakini which flooded, which claimed the lives of thousands of people at one go in the infamous 15th or 16th June disaster 2023, right? And the flooding in this river had its impact as far in the plains as much as Kanpur also. So you can think about the amount of damage caused. Now, Mandakini basically joins river Alaknanda at Rudraprayag. That is where it will join Alaknanda. As it then starts draining, there Bhagirathi basically joins. Bhagirathi, which originates from Gangotri, it joins at Dev Prayag. After that, it is known by the name Ganga. So these are your famous Panch Prayags: Vishnu Prayag, Nand Prayag, Karna Prayag, Rudra Prayag, and Dev Prayag. And these are your Char Dhams, which are being connected by the now infamous Char Dham highway network. Okay. From the region of Yamunotri, you have the river Yamuna, which originates and it joins river Ganga at the region of Allahabad, and that is where it is also known as Prayagraj, okay, or the king of Prayags, basically. So this is about the initial stages of river Ganga. Okay. Now, here, the tributaries that we have talked about, those are the important left bank tributaries that we talked about. The right bank tributaries in this case, if you consider, you will have River Son. River Son has got, this is River Son originating from the Amarkantak. It has got its own tributary, that is River Rihand. Rihand is a tributary of Son, right? Then you have Tamsa. Yamuna is the most important right bank tributary. Yamuna moves through the region of Delhi, moves through the region of even Mathura, Agra rather. That is where River Yamuna drains through. Now, Kanpur and Lucknow, these are twin, referred to as twin cities, very close to each other. Kanpur is drained by River Ganga. Lucknow is drained by River Gomti. Okay, so it is not the case that Kanpur and Lucknow, just because they are close to each other, are drained by the same river. Okay, and basically here Yamuna also will have its tributary, for example, Betwa. Then you have Chambal. The Chambal river system is also quite significant, originating from the Vindhya region. And it is here that a lot of erosion has happened because this is a dry area. Now, this is the infamous Chambal belt also, if you want to refer to it, because of a kind of a badland topography here, because of semi-arid conditions here. And for a long period of time, decades back, you had significant amount of lawlessness here, where the famous saying went about the dacoits of Chambal, right? And you had various different popular names which came into the folklore. Now, this is basically the case of the Ganga river system. Then, when we come to one of the mightiest rivers in South Asia, that is the Brahmaputra river system. Not only in terms of the water carried, but also in terms of the distance. It is one of the mightiest rivers. Significant amount of water load is there. Now, Brahmaputra also has its origin very close to the other side of Mansarovar in the Kailash ranges itself. It originates from the Chemyangdung Glacier in Tibet, near the Kailash ranges. Okay, so from the region of Chemyangdung Glacier in the Kailash range, near the Mansarovar, that is where you have River Brahmaputra originating. Initially, River Brahmaputra would be basically moving through and draining through between the mountains. And that is where it won't have much of a deviation. So that is why in the initial stages, you will find River Brahmaputra to have a kind of a linear flow. In the region of Tibet, it is known by the name of Yarlung Sangpo or Sangpo, which basically means the purifier. So that is where it is revered in the region of Tibet. And then around the region of Namcha Barwa, which is beyond the border of India, but is still considered in the extent of the Arunachal Himalayas. So it is here that as the Himalayas take a sudden syntactial bend, River Brahmaputra also is forced to take a syntactial bend. It is while that Brahmaputra takes that syntactial bend that it carves a very deep gorge around the region of Namcha Barwa. Here, after that, when it enters the region of Arunachal Pradesh, when it enters the Indian border, there it is known by the name of Siang, because, and at that point of time also, as it enters India by the name of Siang, it has got very high speed. It is basically still a very narrow river, mountains. It moves between the mountains, even in Arunachal Pradesh. So it has got very swift velocity, a great hydroelectric power generation potential, which now we are basically keen to exploit. And then it enters the plain area around the town of Sadia, right? That is where, just immediately around the area of where Lohit meets river Brahmaputra, around that region, you have the town of Sadia. Now, beyond Sadia, that is when you refer to the river as Brahmaputra. Before that, it is known as Siang in Arunachal Pradesh. Before that, Yarlung Sangpo in Tibet. Only after Sadia do you refer to it as Brahmaputra. Here, the river, when it enters the plains, it gets very, very wide, and you have to be there to believe it. You cannot simply, me standing here and telling you that river becomes very wide, basically, that doesn't do any justice at all. So that is where it becomes so very wide. So think about it. The Dola Sadia Bridge, which was constructed here in this region, it is many kilometers long, right? So that is why for a long period of time, connectivity across Brahmaputra was a major issue. And that is why the armed forces across the frontiers, they could not be supplied with the latest or reinforcement at a very regular basis, because we do not have the capability, or we do not have the infrastructure. In the past few years now, these bridges have come up across river Brahmaputra, which have increased the connectivity of that area. Now, in the plain areas, Brahmaputra forms a very fertile and a large plain formed of deposits. And that is where Brahmaputra creates that agricultural productivity around. But every year it gets flooded as well, significantly flooded. Even Kaziranga, and the areas around it, they always get flooded. Now, then it exits India from the town of Dhubri. After Dhubri, it enters into Bangladesh. Now, here, when you observe river Brahmaputra, it has got various different left bank and right bank tributaries. So, Lohit is one of those left bank tributaries. Subansiri is where we have recently inaugurated one of the hydel power plants. That is basically the left bank tributary. Then Manas, Sankosh, these are basically your right bank tributaries. Tista is a right bank tributary. Now, this river Brahmaputra will also have a very high sedimentary load. So, Ganga and Brahmaputra, they have such a high amount of sedimentary load that eventually they form the largest delta of the world, and that is the Sundarban Delta, which has got a very fertile land, significant amount of dense vegetation, and lot of biodiversity. Also, that is the home of the Royal Bengal tigers there. Now, because the sedimentary load is so very high, this river within its channel oftentimes forms deposits. If let's suppose this is the river channel, right, they will start depositing materials within the river channel. And in many areas, these deposits end up forming riverine islands. So if you have the river flow, think about it, they are able to form large riverine islands. The largest riverine island in the world is formed by river Brahmaputra, and that is what is the name of that riverine island? Very good, Majuli. Muzlis. That is one of the most innovative names of Majuli that I've heard. So it is basically Majuli, having its own assembly constituency, having its own MLA. So that is how large it is. Majuli Island. Fumdis are different, my dear friend. Fumdis are floating vegetations that you find in the region of Loktak Lake. So that is basically the case of river Brahmaputra. So it traverses eastwards longitudinally for a distance of around 1200 kilometers in a dry and flat region of southern Tibet, where it is known as Sangpo, which means the purifier. It emerges as a turbulent and dynamic river after carving out a deep gorge in the central Himalayas. River emerges from the foothills under the name of Siang or Dehang. Okay, so I think, Deepti, that answers your question. Now, important tributaries: Subansiri, Kameng, Manas, Tista, Sankosh, Buri Dihing, Dansiri, Dibang, Sikang, and Lohit. These are your tributaries. Even Lohit basically ends up causing significant amount of flood in that area. Now, Tista is one of those which significantly is in news, prominently is in news. Whenever you have the news between India and Bangladesh, or the relation between India and Bangladesh coming into equation, always you will have the river Tista, which is mentioned. So basically, why is that? Because of the water sharing pact and the aspect of water sharing. Bangladesh has always wanted India to share the water of river Tista. Now, the central government, in order to improve the relations with Bangladesh, under the leadership of the ex-Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, when the central government delegation went to Bangladesh in the leadership of the Prime Minister, the ex-Prime Minister, it took a kind of a momentary or a kind of a momentous and a visionary decision, which could basically significantly improve the relation between India and Bangladesh. And they said that we are ready to share the water between India and Bangladesh when it comes to the waters of River Teesta. We will share that. Now, Manmohan Singh made that promise. The entire country of Bangladesh rejoiced with the goodwill that India had shown. And that created a lot of goodwill, for that matter, in the common populace of Bangladesh. And mind you, at that point of time, when Sheikh Hasina had just come into power, and before that, you had the Khaleda Zia government. So, during the time of the Khaleda Zia government, the general population and the sentiment towards India was not very friendly. It was only when Sheikh Hasina government came into existence in Bangladesh, or came back into power, that is when pro India sentiment started getting created. And on top of that, you had the Teesta water sharing pact, which was done by the central government. So, it uplifted the mood. But when Dr. Manmohan Singh came back to the country, and basically the central government wanted to implement that, the state government of Bengal basically simply said, no, this is not happening, will not do so. Because that means the farmers in North Bengal will face a deficiency of water. So Bangladesh got significantly irked by that issue, and Bangladesh did hold substantial amount of grudge for that. Then, when the new government came into power, and Prime Minister Modi, when he visited Bangladesh, he also, because that is the beauty of our governance structure, that regardless of the party in power, regardless of the politics in power, we have a kind of a continuum when it comes to foreign policy issues, and also in terms of larger issues. So, Prime Minister Modi, when he visited Bangladesh, there again, he reiterated India's commitment that we are committed to share some amount of water with Bangladesh, so that Bangladesh, the northern portion of Bangladesh, gets some amount of water. Again, when he came back, again, the state government of Bengal simply said that we are not going to do so under any circumstances. And by that point of time, it had become an unpopular decision. And till now, India does not share water with Bangladesh despite the multiple commitments given by the central government. As a consequence of that, it has given rise to a significant amount of hostilities from the side of Bangladesh. It has basically also, in a way, dampened the spirit of what promises India makes. So, every time that a Bangladeshi delegation is going to visit India, or every time when you talk about the international relations in South Asia, Teesta River and the Teesta water dispute always comes into picture. Okay, so that is where, when it comes into picture, please keep in mind that. Now, here, ideally, what you should do is you should basically keep an awareness of which river is joined by which tributary. So that if, let's suppose, a question comes, River Shyok is a tributary of, you should not have the confusion, okay, Shyok is a tributary of Indus or Brahmaputra or Godavari. That confusion should not happen. You should have an idea about which river is joining which tributary is joining which river. That is most important. Right bank, left bank tributary is not required to be learned. Just learn, or just have an idea which river is associated with, or which tributary is associated with which larger river. And that will come only with multiple reiterations and multiple repetitions. Okay. Now, then after that, we come to the peninsular drainage. Now, in the case of the peninsular rivers, the water is getting provided by concentrated amount of rainfall and excess moisture in certain areas. It is not provided by the melting of ice and snow. So here the rivers are a bit seasonal in nature, where the flow of water fluctuates in between the various seasons. Now, here, when we talk about the river, which was also known as, for a significant amount of time, the sorrow of Odisha, that is River Mahanadi. River Mahanadi basically originates in the region of Chhattisgarh, in the Sihawa region near Chhattisgarh, near Raipur district. So here it originates, basically flows through the hilly tracts in the region of Chhattisgarh. It is only in the lower course where river Mahanadi becomes navigable. Navigable basically means you will be able to move through boats in that area. It forms multiple distributaries eventually, and then forms large fertile delta eventually before joining the region of Bay of Bengal. Now, this river Mahanadi also has got various left bank and right bank tributaries. Among the left bank tributaries, you have the large and the famous Shivnath River of that region. Okay. Then you have Hasdev, Shivnath, Hasdev, Mand, and Ib. These are your left bank tributaries. And right bank tributaries are Ong and Tel. These are your right bank tributaries. Okay, so the left bank tributaries are the major ones: Shivnath, Hasdev, Ib, and Man. So origin near Siawa in Raipur district, runs through Odisha and discharges water into the Bay of Bengal. Now, this would cause substantial amount of floods because coming through the hilly areas, it would carry out a lot of materials. It will carry with it a lot of materials which it would eventually deposit and as sediments in the Odisha plain areas of Odisha, and cause vicious amount of flood. It was only after the construction of Hirakud Dam on this where it could be brought under substantial amount of control. Now, length, catchment area not required. Navigation is carried in the lower course of the river. And if you consider the entire aspect of the river and its tributaries, so it covers the state of MP, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha as well. Then comes the largest river of Peninsular India, or the largest river of South India, in fact, that is River Godavari. River Godavari is also referred to as Dakshin Ganga, not only because of its length, but also because of its prominence and relevance. Throughout the annals and the pages of history, you will find that Godavari has been always one of the prime providers and supporters of life in that area. Godavari originates in the Western Ghats. In the Nashik district, you have the, again, as I told you, wherever the river originates, that is generally considered to be a pilgrim place, a place of pilgrimage. So, River Godavari basically you will find originates in the Trambakeshwar region in the Nashik district of uh, Maharashtra, in the region of the Western Ghats, and then it starts draining in the eastward direction. It maintains an eastward flow. So here it is the largest peninsular river. It is joined by multiple tributaries both from the left and the right hand side. It is only in the lower course where again this river becomes navigable. That is where you can move through boats, etc. So here Nashik district of Maharashtra discharges its water in Bay of Bengal. And basically, if you take a look at the tributaries, so Pravara, Purna, Manjra. Manjra is one of the important right bank tributaries, right? It is across this Manjra where you have important water storage structures which provides water supply to the otherwise dry and restive areas of Telangana and eastern Maharashtra, that is the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra, which is generally very dry. So that is where Manjra provides that water from. So it is here that you will find uh, important water storage structure in the form of, those of you from Telangana and Vidarbha region, basically you would be knowing those water storage structures. What are the water storage structures here? So has got important water storage structures. You basically have Singur, Nizam Sagar. Yes, good. Afrin. These are the large water storage structures which provide water to that regions. Now, the Pen Ganga, Vardha, Vain Ganga, right? Now, basically, Pen Ganga, Vardha, and Vain Ganga, they join together. And then the combined water flow is known as Pranahita. It is that Pranahita which then moves ahead and joins river Godavari. Okay, so here Pranhita has got the combined flow of all the three rivers. Indravati, which is again a left bank tributary, it flows through the region of Chhattisgarh. This is where you have the very famous Indravati Tiger Reserve. Maner and Sabri, these are comparatively smaller ones. Now, Godavari, by the way, and the entire river system of Godavari is also quite significantly famous, even when you talk about the mythological aspect of it and the various different folk tales and folklores associated with it. So, what it means is that for thousands of years, this river system has always been revered, this has always been worshipped. Now, heavy floods in the lower reaches to the south of Polavaram, where it basically makes gorges also. So, how is it that in the peninsular rivers you will be able to observe gorges and canyons? You have in the region of Andhra Pradesh, you have a few of the canyon structures and gorges there also. That is because of the sedimentary rock formations there. So, in these sedimentary rock formations, gorges, etc., can be formed and carved out easily. It is navigable only in the deltaic stretches. Then comes River Krishna. River Krishna is the second largest river of the peninsular India, and it originates from the Mahabaleshwar region in the Sahyadris, that is the Western Ghats, and it again drains eastward into the region of Bay of Bengal. It has got tributaries such as Tungabhadra. Tungabhadra is one of the most important, along with the Bhima. Bhima is also one of the larger tributaries of River Krishna, very prominently important tributary of River Krishna. Now, Tungabhadra in itself originates as Tunga and Bhadra, the separate ones. It originates as Tunga and Bhadra, you will see. Now, in this case, what it basically encompasses is that in between this, for example, where River Bhadra originates, that is an iron rich area, and that is also a densely forested area. That is where you will have the case of iron mining also, which is done, and also significant tiger population is found there. Now, in between the river Tunga and Bhadra, you have very fertile plain region created by sedimentary deposits. That is also famously known as the Tungabhadra Doab. It is that Tungabhadra Doab for which the Vijayanagar and the Bahamani kingdoms would oftentimes quarrel with each other. They would oftentimes carry out a large scale onslaught of the population for the control of Tungabhadra Doab. Because in the entire region of Deccan, whosoever controls those plain areas, those are the regions of agricultural productivity. That means those are the regions of revenue generation. So here, Ghat Prabha, Malaprabha, Bhima, Tungabhadra, and Musi. Musi is the river which drains through the region of Hyderabad. So Hyderabad has got river Musi. So this is river Krishna. Observe Bhima, how extensively large Bhima is. Right. Bhima is very, very large. Okay. And then here you will find Ghat Prabha, Mal Prabha, Tungabhadra, Tunga and Bhadra. Basically, that is when they form Tungabhadra. And then eventually it is joined by various other river streams along the way as well. Then comes again one of the most, in the sense of the river water dispute, one of the most controversial ones, one of the ones where now sentiments are attached to such a great extent, that is River Kaveri. Now, River Kaveri, which has been a source of water supply to the region of otherwise drier areas of the south, River Kaveri has been again the source of power, source of revenue in southern part of the country for millennia now. As we talked about earlier also, the rise of the Chola Empire, the mighty Cholas, that happened on the banks of River Kaveri. Now, this river Kaveri originates in the Brahmagiri hills of the Kodagu district near Coorg, right, at a place which is referred to as Thal Kaveri, which is again a significant place of worship. That is the origin place of River Kaveri. Now, the upper catchment area receives rainfall during the southwest monsoon season, and the lower part during the northwest monsoon season. The river carries water throughout the year with comparatively less fluctuation. So, this is a river where, if you observe this, Observe this river system. Then basically this particular portion will receive rainfall due to the southwest monsoon. This particular portion will receive rainfall due to the retreating and the northeast monsoon. So there is water sufficiency which is maintained almost throughout the year, right? It is a different matter altogether that is embroidered in terms of water sharing dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Now, both of them, they virtually people are ready to basically do anything in order to get greater share of water for River Kaveri, because in the otherwise drier areas of this region, if you get water of River Kaveri, that can mean agricultural prosperity in that area. Villages can basically, the fate of the villages, the future of many of these villages can depend upon the availability of water of this River Kaveri. Now, tributaries, River Kabini, Bhavani, Amravati, out of that, Kabini is one of the most prominent ones because it is always in news sometime or the other, because it is across this Kabini where it flows through areas of significant ecological importance. That is the area around Bandipur, the area around the region. Bandipur has got a different river, Moyar, altogether. But across the banks of River Kabini is where you will find the confluence. On one side, you have Bandipur, on other side, you have Mudumalai and Nagarhole. So very rich in terms of biodiversity. Elusive species such as black panther, you can easily sight here. So that is the case of River Kabini. Ideally, you should basically just keep in mind the available or the name of these particular tributaries, the name of these tributaries, basically that which river can they be associated with. Okay. Virappan kidnapped Rajkumar for this. Okay. That was for a, I think, different reason. Later on, he cited this as a reason that, okay, I want Kaveri waters also, but that is a different position altogether. Why only some peninsular rivers are perennial in nature and some are seasonal in nature? Because of availability of rainfall. Because peninsular rivers, they are not supplied through the melting of ice and snow, so they don't have that perennial nature. They have a significant seasonal fluctuation. That is why majority of the river water disputes, they happen in the case of the peninsular rivers. Do we remember the name of dams on Kaveri? Absolutely not. Indus River Basin has only 1/3 of the basin in India, but has almost half the length. Because in India, it drains between the basic mountain areas, between the mountains. So the catchment area is not very high. But when you talk about the region of Pakistan, that is where it will have very large catchment area, many of the small tributaries, that is, etc., that comes in. Yes, Surya, that is correct. Payal, yes. Almost all the peninsular rivers are are seasonal in nature. You don't have a substantial flow. So this is basically the list that you can revise for your prelims. So in the annotations, you will have that. Basically, here you will have the name of the river, the origin, the tributaries, the important cities for Ganga, Brahmaputra, Yamuna, Indus, Kaveri, Krishna, Godavari, Narmada. Just keep that in mind, and that is sufficient. Okay. Now, then we come to inland rivers. What do we mean by inland rivers? So these are those kinds of inland rivers, or these are those kind of rivers which do not empty into a sea. They disappear interior portions of land itself. So basically, when you take the case of River Luni, for example, River Luni. Now, in the case of River Luni, it originates from the Aravalis. Okay, River Luni originates from the Aravalis. In the Ajmer district near Pushkar, that is where River Luni originates. And then it basically disappears in the region of Run of Kutch, because by that point of time, the flow has decreased so significantly. Right. Now, River Luni is quite unique. Along with River Luni, even River Gaggar, for that matter, is considered to be an inland drainage, because inland drainage, you don't have enough flow which can carry it to the sea or the ocean there. Now here, River Luni, basically when it originates from the Aravalis, in that stage initially, in the upper course, you have substantial amount of flow. Upper course, flow is very high. So if the flow is high, that means you will have fresh water. But in the lower course, in the region around Gujarat, the flow reduces so significantly that during the rainy season, yes, it will be dominant, but otherwise the flow is so very less that evaporation is predominant. If the river water doesn't flow swiftly, it will be stagnant in a region, evaporation will be more. So because of that excess evaporation, in the lower course, the water is saline. Is saline in the lower course. Okay, the water is substantially saline in the case of the lower course of the river movement. So that is the case with river Luni. So basically, that is why you will find river Luni to have that, and it disappears in the region of Run of Kutch. So that is an inland river. And now we come to the concept of interlinking of rivers. Now, by the way, so for example, you also have the smaller rivers such as Mahi and Sabarmati, which drain to that area, but they also have a substantial amount of seasonal variation into it. Gujarat otherwise would be a very dry region, has been a very dry region. And it is only due to the Sardar Sarovar project and the Sardar Sarovar Dam, which has been built across River Narmada, that Gujarat gets substantial amount of water flow. So that water flow is associated with the Sardar Sarovar project. Okay, River Mahi is the only river amongst the major rivers in India. River Mahi is the river which crosses Tropic of Cancer twice. So that is a kind of a factual trivia, which, if you know, is better. Now, when we talk about interlinking of rivers, what is the concept of it? So, this was a concept which was earlier floated during the time of the British, and it was floated by Arthur Cotton in the Madras Presidency, where the Britishers were also aware that India had a surplus amount of river drainage or water supply, particularly in the region of the northern plains, in the region of the Himalayan rivers. And in the southern part to the south of the Vindhyas, India always faced a kind of a dry and restive condition, lack of water. So he was of the opinion that while in some portions of India we have surplus water, in some portions of India we have deficit water, if we interlink the river, we can transfer the water from surplus to the deficit area. That was the concept behind it. And it was floated around 1920, where he originally mooted the idea that why can't we bring water from the Himalayan rivers all the way to Kaveri? But it was obviously very costly an endeavor. Then eventually that plan was dropped. India became independent. India had very different priorities to take care of. We had we did not have any kind of wherewithal or fiscal capacity to do so. Then that matter went into cold storage again. It was then in the on the turn of the century when you had late Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee when he became the prime minister. He picked up the issue with again significant rigor. He basically formed a committee for the interlinking of the rivers also. A detailed plan was formulated. The benefit, disadvantage, everything was taken into consideration. But again, this matter went into cold storage. This matter was not picked up. There were simultaneous protests which were happening on the ground in many areas at the name of interlinking, that you are destroying the cultural heritage of the country by transferring the precious waters of River Ganga to somewhere else, or the precious water of River Godavari to somewhere else, or precious water of River Kaveri to somewhere else. So everybody was concerned about their own cultural heritage. Nobody wants their cultural heritage to be mixed with any other thing, right? So people across the Ganga River Basin, they always felt that this is the purest. People across the Godavari River Basin, they felt this is the purest, and so on and so forth. So there were protests going on. This matter went into cold storage. And in the late 2000s, India suffered from these twin disasters of flood and droughts occurring very frequently and very simultaneously. That is when this issue was taken to the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court basically by the year 2012, in a way, asked the government that why are you not working on this? Formulate a committee and start implementing it as soon as possible. But then again, this matter subsided for some time because everybody knows that this is a long term project. This is not a project that any government will be able to foresee within its tenure. This is a project which can run for decades altogether, right? And nobody is willing to risk their political capital or the money on a project which will go for such a long term. Now, again, after some time, this project has been picked up, and this project is now in the phase of implementation in certain areas. For example, Kane and Betwa are being interlinked. Kosi and Mechi are being interlinked. So there is interlinking which is being carried out, but on a very selective scale. Now, this concept of interlinking or this project of interlinking of rivers has got various different phases. It has got the Himalayan component where the plan is to interlink the Himalayan rivers. It has got the peninsular component where the plan is to connect the peninsular rivers. And it has also got a kind of a connect between the Himalayan and the peninsular rivers. So that is the entire plan of it. So when we talk about the interlinking of rivers, this is oftentimes asked in the mains examination that why is inter or should interlinking of rivers be carried out, what is the concept of interlinking of rivers, what are the benefits of interlinking of rivers, etc. Even in the interview process, this question has been repeated for last 15 years or more now, and so is the case in the mains, both for your GS as well as optional. So here we shall be talking about the benefits, the advantages and the disadvantages of the interlinking, and you have to formulate your own opinion. Why do I say so? Because then if you formulate your opinion, you will be much more convinced about whether interlinking is good or bad. Whichever way you go through, whether you say that interlinking is good or whether you say interlinking is bad, eventually you have to basically substantiate that. When you create the answer, you have to be able to substantiate that. When you write that or when you narrate that answer in front of the interview board, you have to be convinced about it. Okay, but when you are writing the answer, whether you are saying that interlinking is good or bad, the conclusion, the way forward should always be, regardless of interlinking or not, conservation of water is a must, and water security in different areas will be guaranteed only if at the local scale we are able to store and conserve water, store rainwater, conserve rainwater. So that is something which you should always write as a way forward. So here, when we talk about, yes, ideally you have to balance both pros and cons. Ideally, both of them should be highlighted. So here the advantages and then the disadvantages. So when we talk about the advantages, it can tackle the twin issue of flood and drought. Can tackle twin disasters of floods and droughts. Right? That is one of the advantage. Then other than that, can bring newer areas under cultivation. Cultivation. Then what are the other advantages that you can think of? Can promote inland navigation will provide water security. Then after that, can improve the local economy by agriculture, obviously, and also promoting blue revolution. That is, promoting the aspect of pisciculture and agriculture. Can recharge groundwater. Groundwater. Then, after that, can provide or can generate employment, right? Because when you interlink the rivers, you will have a massive construction at a scale that India would never have witnessed. So, obviously, a lot of employment can be generated. Pisciculture means rearing of fishes, aquaculture basically. Okay, inland transportation, inland navigation is the same. Now, if you take a look at the disadvantages, huge cost involved. So, huge cost involved. Basically, the latest estimates that the Modi government carried out, basically, the estimates is to the tune of $183 billion, which is large, right? Then deforestation, then displacement of population, then impact on biodiversity. For example, here there will be different impact. For example, when we talk about the Cane Betwa interlink. Now, in the case of the Cane Betwa interlink, the region of the Panna Biosphere Reserve that will experience some submergence, right? So, as it experiences submergence, lot of these tiger habitat areas will be lost. But also, when we talk about the aquatic ecosystem, that is the freshwater aquatic ecosystem or the riverine ecosystem, many of the times, for example, if you have, if you consider one of the species in river Ganga, now they will be suited to the conditions of river Ganga. They might not do that well when that water becomes less or that flow is reduced, right? So here, basically, inland navigation bhavna is transportation through the rivers. If all the rivers are interconnected, you can basically move for transportation. Then will impact the natural flow in the river, right? Then after that, land acquisition issues, you can merge it with the displacement of population also. So it will have socio-cultural impact, because rivers are oftentimes associated with the sentiments and the cultural reverence of the population. So socio-cultural impact will also be there. So these are few of the disadvantages associated, can lead to scarcity, of water getting distributed across both the rivers. Okay? No, generally interlinking won't lead to landslides now. Okay? So that is basically the disadvantage of the interlinking of rivers. So always understand, regardless of whether you are highlighting the advantages, whether you are concentrating on the advantages, or whether you are concentrating on the disadvantages, always keep one thing in mind, that eventually you have to always write that the way forward is always going to be conservation of water at the micro level, the watershed management. In that watershed area, you have to ensure maximum rainwater harvesting, maximum stream capture. In that case, if there is water security and water sufficiency at the local level, the country will always prosper, right? Pisciculture means rearing of fishes. Okay, that is basically pisciculture, right? So here, basically, you will observe these are the three components of interlinking. You have the Himalayan component, you have the peninsular component, and you have the component which joins them. Now, out of all these, amongst the major ones, now many of the interlinking projects in the region of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, they have been initiated, but they have been stuck in a limbo because of shortage of funds. So the state government launched them, and very soon they realized that we don't have any money to carry it on, because we need to do other things in the state also. So they started asking the center for the funds, and the center said that it is your project that you are implement it. So that is why many of them are stuck in the limbo. Kane Betua is going through that phase of implementation. Kosi Mechi had received that kind of a clearance from the cabinet, approval had happened, but after that the execution is really slow. Kosi Mechi can have the potential to prevent the flooding disasters in the region of the Kosi River Basin and can provide water to the otherwise very dry region of northeastern part of Bihar. So that is where it is being carried out. For example, when we talk about the Kane Betwa interlink, the very basic purpose of Kane Betwa interlink is to basically provide water supply into the otherwise dry area of Bundelkhand in the region of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Bundelkhand has been dry for some time now because of the displaced and the changed rainfall pattern. Bundelkhand does not receive very high amount of rainfall. And due to the water scarcity in that area, further exaggerated by the dry conditions of Chambal Basin, Bundelkhand for some decades now has witnessed declining crop productivity, subsequent crop failures, etc. Due to that, because of declining productivity, the region of Bundelkhand does not have significant economic opportunities. That is why many of the farmers, many of the landed farmers, landless laborers, all of them, they have migrated outwards from Bundelkhand to move into the nearby city to work as migrant laborers. So, to provide an assured drinking water supply and agricultural water supply to the region of Bundelkhand, that Kane Betwa interlink is being talked about. But the problem with this is that it has got the issue where right now water level in both Betwa and Kane is not sufficient to be transferred. And please understand, transfer of river does not mean like in your childhood days how you would play that in a sand you simply draw a ditch and water is connected from here to here. Because when you're talking about transfer of water over a large distance, interlinking and transfer of water over a large distance, you have to build various different pump houses, you have to build various different lift irrigation systems where water basically supplied to a greater level and then stored and then supplied. So it is a kind of a complicated construction structure and a construction mechanism, and that is going to take some time. So submergence of the Panna Biosphere Reserve, some part of it is also happening. Lot of protests are there on the ground, but then overall, in the future, we can have the optimistic view that it can have some productive outcome going ahead into the future. Okay, so that is the Kane Betwa interlink. Now, Narmada and Tapi, not very important, but basically Tapi is not at all important, not a major river. When we talk about Narmada, Narmada originates in the region of Amarkantak, drains through the Rift Valley between Vindhya and Satpura. Amongst the tributaries that it has are very, very small and inconsequential because they follow a pinnate drainage pattern. Eventually, in the region of the lower course, that is where you have the Sardar Sarovar project. Sardar Sarovar project has also been mired in a lot of controversy. It is that Sardar Sarovar project which provides water through the region to the region of Gujarat, which makes it agriculturally productive in certain areas. It is here where the very famous Sauni project was implemented, where in the and Gujarat basically has done these innovative measures quite significantly, where when you take a look at this the region of Gujarat, basically the heat is so very high. Lack of rainfall and dry conditions means the heat is very high. So as a consequence of that, you find that lot of water in the canals and the channels are lost due to evaporation. So Gujarat government, what it had done previously is it covered many of these canals with the solar panels so that it could generate electricity also. And from the river Narmada, as it was providing water from the Sardar Sarovar project, it also provided water in the pipelines so that water could not be lost due to evaporation. Anjali, sir, why are you not answering my questions? I am also your student. I don't know why you are not replying me. What do you think? What could be the reason, Anjali? Come up with a good conspiracy theory and enlighten me. Why is it that I'm not answering your questions? What could be the possible reason? Your questions are very hard. Maybe that is the case. What could be the reason? Why do you think what is it that I am supposed to gain by not answering your questions or by ignoring your questions? Think about it for a brief moment. What could be the plausible reasons? In the interlinking of rivers, the last question that you had said, interlinking may lead to flood. How will interlinking lead to flood? Let me know. So interlinking is, if I am saying advantage of interlinking is can tackle flood, how can the disadvantage be that interlinking will lead to flood? And you also mute my ID. That means a lot of discrimination is happening against you, Anjali. What do we do? Should we go to some other UN forum or International Court of Justice? Every student is on mute. Every student is on mute. Every student who is attending the session, they are on mute. The reason why you guys are on mute is basically if all of you start speaking, basically you will be interacting with each other. You will be asking, okay, Anjali, how are you doing? Other person will be saying that I'm doing good. So it will be kind of a Zoom meeting where I will be muted and very soon I will switch off my camera and you will have a jolly good interaction for 3.5 hours. Everybody is on mute. There is no discrimination happening against anybody. Please understand that. If you get that feeling that there is discrimination that is happening, many of the questions, see, understand, if I'll give you the number of questions that have been asked in the duration of the class. So each of them, they are asking many, many questions. There is bound to be, see, every class I am covering around 30 to 40 minutes answering the questions. This is the reason why we are lagging behind. I have been answering questions repeatedly. I have answered your questions also. But if it is the case that every time that you write something, should I be able to comment immediately or not? That is why we have the very well qualified subject matter experts. The subject matter experts who are present there, they have appeared for, they have cleared multiple means, appeared for multiple interviews. So even if you get some idea from them, it won't dilute your level of understanding. Okay, so please understand that it is not the case that basically, okay, so there are multiple Anjali. See, this is also the issue. So one Anjali I'm answering, there is another Anjali. So how do I know which Anjali basically is asking the question? I'm answering to a question of Anjali there. And please understand, I have nothing to do with discriminating anyone. Meanwhile, there are people who are consistently typing questions as I'm interacting with you. So they will also have the grievance that you are interacting with Anjali for so much time every class, and I am writing the questions and you are not answering to me. I have got nothing to gain, my dear friends, by ignoring your questions. I am here to answer your questions. I'm here to help you clear this examination. Okay? So please don't have that kind of concept, right? Please understand, it is not the case that by ignoring your questions I will say that okay, maybe your question is so very difficult, but even that is not the case in this situation. So understand, there is no such prejudice being done that you are put me on mute also, you are not answering me also, I am your student and then I am also your student, and why you are discriminating against me. Understand, it is a kind of a thing that you have to be mature about, be a bit mature about it. Okay, right? And this is the reason you cannot basically satisfy anyone and everyone here, but from next time I will ensure that I will answer your questions. But what about the other ones? They will say that answer my questions also. So that is why we have a separate doubt clearing session. A separate session will be there only to clear your doubts. Okay, so ask as many doubts as possible, my dear friend. Okay. In weekend batches, the students can speak, yes, because weekend batches are so very long. You would find that in weekend batches, the questions are also distributed. That one question will come in the morning, other question will come in the afternoon, the third question will come in the evening. Here, by the time, if I say Indus River system, immediately 100 questions will come and flood at the same time. So please understand, be a bit mature about it. It is not the case of ignoring the questions. I will direct the SMEs again. I will request the SMEs again to be very prompt in terms of answering so that you don't face this kind of a grievance. Okay. And now you are appearing for or trying to become a civil servant or a bureaucrat. Think about the post that you are studying for. Think about the post that you are applying for. Think about what you are trying to become. Right. So have that kind of attitude also. Anyways, so tomorrow we'll have an extra session at 6, and we'll continue till 6 to around 10. We will continue. Meanwhile, uh, Anjali, if you may allow, there are other questions that I will address. Meanwhile, if you have questions, you can say, you can write. I will answer that also. So, Sham, why should we go through desalination instead of interlinking of rivers? Why should we go through desalination instead of interlinking of rivers? Because interlinking is not only for water supply. Interlinking, is it only for water supply? No. Interlinking is basically because you have floods, droughts, irrigation, everything is solved. Desalination plants will only give you water supply for drinking water in a particular localized area. Okay. Udesh, is the protest to the Yetina Hole project one example? So, see, Anjali, another example I'll give you. Poor Udesh has been asking about the socio-cultural impact of Yetina Hole for some time now. Just because we did not have the scope of it, Udesh, I will answer that question about Yetina Hole if possible tomorrow. Okay, and Chandu, how to identify origin of river looking at the map? End point is generally around the major seas and the oceans. Atharv, for controlling floods, desiltation is helpful, but is it not like Rate Khanan by Rate mafias? So the excess of anything will be, see, the siltation which will happen, that you have to remove. You don't have to remove the riverbed. That is what is done by the mining mafias. Okay. Anita, Tista flood, is it involved? Tista River, is it involved in the upper courses? Yes. And Rishika, do we need to remember the dams list given by the link? So this link I have provided to you so that you can refer to it. I will give you the map also. In the mapping portion, I will give you the map for this area also. Keep on referring to this. Any new updates that come, any new news stories that come, just ensure that you click on. Here you will find in this list, you will find the details of the interlinking also. Interlinking projects also, the detail you will find. Okay. No, this class ends now. Vittal. Does any country have done the complete? In various different countries have done it to some level, but no one has done the complete of interlinking. And interlinking is beneficial more than its cons. Yes, long-term benefit is substantial. If you are able to go for a sustainable development, long-term benefits are quite significant. How to revise already completed subjects simultaneously while covering. So you have, if you are a full-fledged candidate, you have a lot of time throughout the day where you can always see, ensure that what your ideal strategy should be current affairs. Without miss, you have to study the newspapers, you have to go through the newspapers. GS portion, one, let's suppose one session you are attending, you have to revise that. So maybe a 3.5 hour session, it will take you around 45 minutes to revise that if you are attentive in the class, or 30 minutes to revise that at max. Then after that, take some time out for the immediately previous portions that you have covered, revise that also. Still, you will have a lot of time through the day if you are a full-time aspirant. Or in case you are a working professional, find time on the weekends. That is where you can extract. Okay, right? Do India have a potential for inland transport? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. We have around 14,500 kilometers stretch of the rivers which are navigable by boats. So that is the case. Okay, right? That is the predicament of every student, Shazia. There is not much that can be done in that case, sadly. So I hope no grievances are pending. I hope we can basically go back happy, right? Hasn't Kaveri dispute been resolved? No. Kaveri dispute, there has been a kind of a judgment which has been given, but then you have basically Karnataka also vying for more water, Tamil Nadu also vying for more water. It is a kind of a ticking time bomb which can tick at any point of time. Underground pipes for interlinking will be very costly because that digging will also be very costly process. By melting or by climate change, glaciers can get exhausted. Okay. With that, we end the session. For rest of you who have been patient enough, thank you very much. We meet again tomorrow. And for those who have some grievance that the questions have not been answered, etc., we'll always try to better ourselves. Tomorrow, we will have, or after that, the next sessions, we will have the SMEs. Also, we will direct them to be much more proactive and much more prompt in order to give the answers. So, with that, I bid you goodbye. See you again tomorrow at 6 a.m. Take care of yourself. Be at peace. Relax. Goodbye. Thank you.